Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to colinslaststand.com. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 72. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by Chris Raygun Bridges. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course.
Do you think a lot of people will get that reference? I assume a lot of people will get that reference.
I assume so, yeah.
It's a Death Stranding reference.
It is.
And finally, Chris and I had the opportunity, because the game came out so we can buy it, to start playing the game, and we're going to talk in depth about that today in just a little while. I'm really excited actually to talk to Chris about it, because I don't really know exactly what he's thinking about it. You know, I don't know. I can't assume to know all these things. I can't be everywhere. Okay.
Yeah. You're
I can't
not
know
omniscient.
everything. Jesus
Not yet.
Christ. Not yet. I don't wield the mystical and arcane powers that you wield in order to randomly bring these games into existence that we talk about. And so I'm trying to get in touch with my arcane third eye, let's call it.
Yeah.
Third eye. Is there a third ear?
Yes.
Yeah, I would assume so, right?
There's a third, there's an additional everything probably.
Yeah. Like anything you can sense.
Yeah, like a third nostril or a second nose.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I love that. That's perfect. Thank you so much for that, Chris. All right, Chris, let's get right into what I think is some news that we have to get it over with. We've been hiding. We've had a little secret, you and I.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not... first of all, Chris and I have a few secrets. Some of them are romantic. We're not going to tell you about all of our secrets.
Yeah.
But this particular secret about Sacred Symbols is that, as I announced today on Patreon, and everyone can read it, whether you're a patron or not, so go check it out. I am moving. I am officially, after 12 and a half years since Chris was born, I've lived in California. And I'm finally leaving, and I'm moving to Richmond, Virginia to be with my family. I'm going to buy a house and hang out. I'm going to be an Italian son for just a little while, you know, with my mom. I'm going to hang out with my family and kind of bounce around a little bit. I think I can get away with that for a little while, you know, get fattened up a little bit, do all that kind of stuff. But I know that people had been, and I anticipated this, and Chris knew that I was anticipating this. I was like, people are going to be worried about our ability to do the show remotely. What are we going to do about it? And we're doing this show remotely right now, but in secret, we did episode 69 of the show remotely, episode 71 of this show remotely, Sacred Symbols plus 10, and Sacred Symbols plus 11, all done remotely. How many people noticed?
Yeah, we've done like a bunch of them.
How many people noticed? Nobody noticed. So no, I think one person wrote in asking if it was because they noticed some edit. I don't know what it was, but we have a lot of listeners, many tens of thousands of people listen to our show, and no one noticed. So I think we're good. What do you think of that, Chris?
I think that's great. Super convenient for me, definitely.
I know. I think that, I mean, even today, Chris was actually going to come over. I'm still in LA right now. I'm actually going to go to Virginia for a few weeks, starting next week, to just kind of hang out and start to settle myself and figure out what I'm going to do there. But I texted Chris this morning because he was going to come over, and I'm like, I mean, what's even the point of coming over at this point? It's just you being in a car for a combined 3 hours of your life, wasting money. The show is just as good. The audience lets us know when something is wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the internet.
Yeah, they'll let us know.
They'll relentlessly let you know, Chris, is what they're going to do. So that's happening, and I'm excited about it. Nothing changes. You guys can go read the letter, but a lot of this really has to do with me and kind of my own emotional well-being, and that I don't think that I've tended to myself appropriately in building Colin's Last Stand. I think I've ignored a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil inside of myself and kind of built a wall around myself. And Chris really is one of the only people I ever see. So, because Chris is one of the only people I trust. So I have to change that. And I think part of me changing that, Chris, is going home and being around my family in Richmond, even though we are islanders. My mom and stepdad live down there now. Both of my sisters and their families live down there. My uncle and aunt and cousin live down there. My brother Dagan's only an hour flight away. My dad is only going to be an hour flight away on the island. So I think this is going to be good for me, and I think necessary. And I really wanted to make sure that we took care of the product. And we took care of it. You guys didn't notice, and that's all I needed. And I was so nervous not only about that, but about announcing it. I was nervous that people were going to be mad at me for some reason. And the thousands of comments that I've gotten today across Twitter and Patreon and Facebook and elsewhere, and my phone's blowing up, all positive. So I really do appreciate and thank you so much for that. And I really do thank Chris as well, because he's really been a sounding board for me for months as I've meticulously in Colin-like fashion worked through this in my mind.
Yeah.
So
it's been a journey.
It has. So I appreciate your patience on that, Chris. And I'm glad that you're excited and happy with it too, because I think our show can go on for many years to come in this remote format. So,
definitely.
All right. So as people know, our show is supported on Patreon, patreon.com/Collins/Stan. We do an extra episode of Sacred Symbols each week called Sacred Symbols Plus. That is only for patrons. Last week's was an investigation into kind of games journalism and what's going on with Kotaku and Deadspin and the Go Media people and stuff. It's a little bit of a political conversation. You can go check that out. This week's Sacred Symbols Plus is going to be a little more lighthearted. We're going to jump back into the mailbag. And as people know, we've been saving your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas that we can't quite wedge into a normal show. So we're going to start whittling down that list as well. And I'm really excited and looking forward to do that, because I really do feel bad. We get so many inquiries from the audience on Patreon and we just can't use them all. I feel bad about that.
Yeah. I wish I could see them.
I know. I gotta get you a Patreon. Like I really gotta like lean on them now. You're on Patreon too, so you know how it is with them, but
yeah, it's annoying.
They don't really seem to improve the product very much, on the back end anyway. For the front end, I think it gets improved. But one of the things I've been asking them for is like administration access for not only for you, but for Dustin and for other people. It's my business, it's not like I'm like some dude working and this is my side gig. So I don't have all the tools at my disposal. And one of those tools, I have the greatest tool of all at my disposal, which is Chris. But that was funny. It was a little mean. That was
nice.
It was a little mean. I mean,
it was
a little
nice. Mean. It was mean, but it was like East Coast mean, which is like vaguely nice.
I'm getting it all back into my veins.
Yeah, you got.
So yeah, we need those tools, and I'll keep leaning on them because I know a lot of people are having problems with the RSS feed too. I'm sorry, not the RSS feed, the Patreon app. Remember that you can use our RSS feed to just not use the Patreon app. So there you go. Very easy. So look forward to that. Chris, as always, we have a few corrections, comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas, notions, etc. that I want to get through before we get into what we're playing, which is Death Stranding. So let's take these in the order that I've written them down here. No specific order, of course. Christian Coulter wrote into us on Patreon. He says, "Hey, Colin, just a quickie. Is it money or time consuming to change the album art on an episode by episode basis in the podcast feed? Those pictures that come with the podcast on YouTube look nice. Can we get them on the audio?" This is a good question, Christian. So I actually make thumbnails for each episode of the show, which people on Patreon see, YouTube, and certain podcast services. I don't know, Chris, why certain podcast services do not take album art on an episode by episode basis. We're uploading this album art to the podcast feed, to the RSS like launcher, but it's not finding its way in certain places. All the podcasts I listen to have the same issue. I use the Apple Podcast app, so I don't know. I don't know how I can fix that for you. No idea. David Colin Copeland, maybe related to the great drummer Stuart Copeland from The Police, says, "Hey, slightly bi-curious Colin and creamy Chris." Everyone likes calling you creamy.
That is, I don't like that necessarily.
Yeah,
it's very. It doesn't conjure a nice visage.
No, very well put. Colin, how does it... He takes issue with me with this thing I've been complaining about with PSVR, and I wanted to read this aloud. He says, "Colin, how does it not make sense that wires come out of both ends of the PSVR processing unit? If you look at it, it's a baby PlayStation which has cords coming out of the back which go to the TV and cords that come out of the front to charge the controller. It would make absolutely no sense to have all the cords come out of the back of the device only. On the back, all the cords go towards your PS4 and TV, and on the front, the cords come out to the thing you wear on your head. Makes perfect sense, and you are wrong." Well, Mr. Copeland, first of all, you spelled your middle name Colin with 2 L's. You know how I feel about that. Now, I have a problem with this, Chris, because we do complain, or I specifically complain about the PSVR unit having these wires coming out of both ends, but it's not the same as charging a controller in front of a PS4 or PS3. Everyone look at your PS4 right now, and you can see how the cord in front of it is removable, and in fact, it's just a flat surface.
Yeah.
That looks clean. The PSVR unit looks like a homebrewed 1970s Apple computer, with all the cords coming out of it and all the weird shit.
It's very inelegant is the best way to put it.
Indeed.
I feel like.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, David Colin Copeland with 2 L's. David Colin Copeland with 2 L's. he had a problem with this, and I don't know if he's alone or others also take umbrage with what I have to say about the PSVR unit. I find it quite inelegant.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think it's objectively, like, it is a very cumbersome thing. VR in general is like this. This is kind of just a problem with VR. It's very just messy and inelegant and very unpleasant to look at when it's not being used. And even when it is being used, it's quite not pleasant to see.
Indeed.
Somebody jumping around and sweating.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I sweat enough just staying still.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can imagine what I look like when I'm playing PSVR. Garrett Roberts wrote into us, Chris. He says, hey, CNC, minor correction for episode 71. While talking about Call of Duty's dev cycle, you said the next year's game is being developed by Sledgehammer. While this was initially the case, Sledgehammer and Raven were actually pulled off of the project, and whatever they had developed was given to Treyarch, who will be putting Call of Duty Black Ops 5. I didn't hear anything about Black Ops 5, which is heavily rumored to be a soft reboot of the Black Ops sub-franchise, similar to what the new Modern Warfare is. A lot of people wrote in about this, Chris. I guess I was in error about this.
Yeah.
I don't know what Sledgehammer's doing then. Hopefully something else.
Yeah, what the hell is that then?
And of course, Precious Raven, who I've always wanted to see make a new game, but they had...
Poor Raven.
I know. I don't think Raven's made a game of their own in like a decade now, so it's kind of sad. I think Singularity and that Wolverine game were the last, and that was last generation. So yeah, Garrett and others, thank you for the correction. Duly noted. Nick Ushinsky wrote into us about Shenmue, which we talked about last week for some reason. He says, hey guys, in the last episode, you had talked about there being no hype for Shenmue 3. It comes out on the 19th for $60. And in Best Buy's leaked Black Friday ad, Shenmue 3 will be $35. That's less than 2 weeks from its initial release. The publisher must know this game is going to bomb. I saw that. Did you see that?
I did see it.
Yeah.
Somehow, for some reason, I'm very in tune with Shenmue news, and I did manage to see this. I don't know. I think they understand that it's a niche product, and they just want to get it out to as many people who might be able to afford it and might be curious enough to buy it. I mean, we talked about this last time. It's such a niche game, man. It really is. It was on a system that was a niche system. So, like, yes. I mean, like, what are you gonna do?
That's true. Yeah, Dreamcast only sold about 12 million units before it was discontinued unceremoniously in the spring of 2001. I remember it very well. See, 2001 was really tough because in the spring we had Dreamcast decommissioned, as it were, and then we had 9/11.
Yeah.
So it was not a great year. But yeah, Shenmue 3 already preemptively discounted $25 on Best Buy's Black Friday ad, apparently the leaked ad. So if you're looking forward to playing Shenmue 3 and you can wait, and I don't see why you wouldn't be able to wait 2 weeks because there are so many games out right now and coming out, then you can save a cool $25 and then,
yeah.
I mean, you could subscribe to Colin's Last Stand's Patreon. $25 at the $2 per month level will pay for an entire year of Colin's Last Stand's Patreon, by the way. And that will let you get all the access to Sacred Symbols Plus and all of these kinds of things. I just had to throw that out there.
Yeah,
just in case you're looking to save some money on Shenmue 3 and that money's burning a hole in your pocket.
I'm sure we have a very large Shenmue 3 fan community.
So for some reason, we probably do.
Yeah, probably.
Cameron O'Neill wrote into us and said, hey, CNC, during last week's podcast, you both seemed perplexed about why Ubisoft and other publishers would be announcing PS4 and PS5 games and not just one SKU. To me, it seemed perfectly clear that the reason is PS5 games will be $69.99, not $59.99. This seems in keeping with your long-held theory that game prices are bound to rise eventually. Do you guys think this could contribute to why the backwards and forwards compatibility verbiage has been cryptic from Sony? Thanks for all the hard work. Cameron might be onto something here, Chris, but God forbid that that's actually true, because that's going to be really confusing to people.
I don't know if I'm sold on that. I think if anything, they'd want to keep prices the same, specifically because the digital storefronts are now like the main way that people buy video games, and also because they've got all these subscription services that are hooking people onto the platform. So I don't actually necessarily think there is as much of a need for a rise in price as there used to be now, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It's all about, like you're saying, it's about volume versus price. And the argument always goes in economics that if you lower the price, you can push more volume. And theoretically, if your margins are high enough, you can actually make more of a profit by selling more at a lower price. I mean, that's just basic economics. But what's confusing to me about Cameron's idea here is he's on to something, I think, because I do think game prices are going to ubiquitously go up next generation. But with PS5's forwards compatibility, it really does put people in a dicey situation, because if the PS5 version of Watch Dogs Legion or whatever is $70, and then the PS4 version that goes in your PS5 is $60, then that just means that no one's going to buy PS5 games, even if they have a PS5, which Sony might not care about or the third parties might not care about. But that's why I think that all of the game prices have to go up on a console or in an ecosystem. So you can release Ghost of Tsushima as a PS4 game natively at $60 and keep it there, but Killzone, whatever, 5 is going to cost $70. I think that's the way it's going to go.
No, yeah. If anything, it would make more sense to have them be the same price. So that way you're like, oh, well, I might as well just get the PS5 one.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because why would I get the probably worse one? Maybe however the hell they're doing this.
I just feel like we're going to be talking about this for just ad nauseum for months.
It's going to be a relentless conversation.
I don't know. I'm excited to learn more simply so we don't have to have the conversation, but we'll have it. I mean, if that's what you want, we'll have it. Fuck it. Jordan wrote into us, said, fellas, I was initially going to let this slide, but I feel like the information is too important to go unsaid. And this is a weird one, and I don't know, Jordan, but I'm going to read it, and we'll really get into this. He says, last week we were all lamenting a young man that shit himself on a date, and how it probably ended poorly for him. I can't believe I have to say this, but if you shit yourself in public, go into a bathroom stall, clean yourself up, take off your underwear, and dump them in the trash. Going commando until you get back home is a vast improvement over walking around with shitty underwear. If this information just saves one date, the three of us will be heroes for having disseminated it to the masses. May you go forth with draws on shat. Now, Jordan, I feel like you're really jumping the gun here because last week when we talked about the young man who went on a date and shat himself, I don't feel like we had any detailed information that he just kept. Did we talk about how he just kept the underwear, his dirty underwear on? I mean, I assumed that he went to the bathroom.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, I don't see.
That seems like such a bad, like even just from a basic mammalian survival instinct standpoint, like it seems like you would you'd not want to walk around in ruined underwear, and people got plenty of underwear. It's not like a nice shirt, right? Where you're like, oh man, I don't want to throw my nice shirt away. You know, he definitely threw it away. There's like that's a strange assumption on your part, Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan. I mean, do you have a scat fetish? I mean, you could be honest with me. I'm not gonna judge you if you
can't
do.
be honest with me. I will judge.
Chris is gonna judge you for sure. But I mean, I guess I don't know, because if I want to know what the nature of this shart was, because if it was not that catastrophic, where it's just a little bit on your cheeks and it's a little bit on you could probably clean it up thoroughly enough to keep your underwear on.
No.
Because then you really risk that. I mean, because then you have no barrier to potential further disaster. I mean, this is kind of what I'm talking about.
How many times have you shit yourself more than once in a day, though?
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, that's not like a shotgun scenario.
Sure, that's a good point. I don't think I've shit myself more than once in a day. I mean, that would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know. Now, I got an endoscopy and colonoscopy a few times, and I had to clean myself out for that over like an 18-hour period. And you don't. Holy moly, dude! The things that they give you and the things they tell you to go buy and take so that you clear yourself out for the procedure, you've never seen a situation quite like that.
Yeah, I'm quite glad. I'm quite glad I have not.
Let's just put it like that. Finally, before we get into the games we're playing, Brad E. wrote into us and said, hey, CNC, I write seeking your sympathies and advice. I consider myself an adult and like to think I can handle life's troubles, but I've been shaken to my core. Yesterday, I played Rocket League online and was ruthlessly bullied by a gang of children. I was relentlessly bombarded with such hateful things. We cannot even speak of them. I'm a sensitive guy, and these kids just eventually got to me and I started sweating, could barely hold the controller. The little bastards mentally broke me. When my wife came home, I wept in her arms like a little baby. So I ask, what does a man do when one does not shit talk? How about you two? You always get pushed around. How do you cope? My wife said she's going to sell my PS4 if I keep crying. Please help. And thanks for the support. Well, thank you, Brad. I assume you're joking, but maybe you're not. I've always been kind of interested in this, Chris, because you're much more of an online gamer. You hear people, you talk to people online.
For sure.
What do you do when you don't want to shit talk? Or you don't want to play that game, and you just want to play the game you're playing. In other words, you don't want to play the metagame.
Oh, yeah. It's very rare that I don't feel like relentlessly bullying people who don't deserve it. But
sure.
On the off chance that I don't, I just mute people. You can mute people pretty easily. I usually do that anyway when I'm playing a game and I'm trying to relax. Even when people are nice and they're saying like, "Oh, nice work," I'm like, I don't want to hear you. So I'll just go through the menu and go through the roster and just mute everybody preemptively most of the time.
Smart.
But you gotta toughen up, man. They're just children. They're
Yeah,
going to be, depressed real soon.
I know. Yeah, I mean, wait until those children are adults. And
Not even adults. Wait until they're like vaguely 18.
Right.
And then they're going to be already like smitten with disaster and loss.
They're going to, especially in this generation, they're going to be used to it. They're going to be real used to it. Do you think Brad really had a nervous breakdown when he was playing
No.
Rocket League? No, I don't think so either. But
I do think he got trash talked by children, though.
yeah, I mean that's rough. I'm afraid of kids. Haven't we talked about this on the show in the past? Like I'm scared of kids because they're so judgmental.
Kids are scary because they're honest and they've not yet developed empathy yet.
Right.
And you're not quite sure whether or not a kid is like fully like there. As far as like just having basic human consideration.
Yeah, it's too much. Like I was supposed to go read a book. I think I talked about this on the show. I was supposed to go read a book to like my nephew's class, and I wasn't able to for unrelated reasons. But I was thinking about it. I'm like, man, are these kids gonna like harass me and make fun of me because I'm fat or something, or like I'm ugly. There's a lot of things out there you gotta worry about.
Yeah, like I remember being a kid and being like, that guy's fat and dumb.
Yeah.
I remember probably saying that verbatim.
Yeah, sure.
Some
I mean,
poor soul.
children are mean. They're very mean.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, in this 21st century life, they have not very little to live for at this point. So,
No, exactly.
except for Fortnite, like that video of the kid beating the shit out of the bush outside his house.
I love that video.
That's like one of my favorite videos.
That's the only
ever.
positive thing that I associate with Fortnite.
All right, Chris, let's get into what we're playing. We're both playing Death Stranding.
Yeah.
Steven Stabler wrote into us. He said, hey, guys, not a question, but a comment. I kind of like that you aren't getting games early anymore. Normally, gaming podcasts talk about a game, and by the time the public gets to play, they have already moved on to talking about the next new game. For example, Death Stranding. I'm playing it without knowing what you guys think of it yet. It's like we get to experience it together. Anyway, just a silver lining of the industry shitting on you.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, it is.
A nice, wholesome idea.
It's kind of relieved a stress valve in my own mind for me as well. It's stressful to not have the games and not have access. And some people do send us games. I don't want to make it seem like no one sends us games, but not having to play games or not feeling the need to like be part of the conversation in quotes, as we used to say at IGN. I hate that fucking term. Kind of stress-free for me because it doesn't seem like the audience really cares. So
yeah,
that's
it's super
nice.
good. It's like a lot of I find that that's like a common opinion with most content nowadays. It's like people will wait for Donkey to say something, and it's fine because it's Donkey's opinion. He could be like years late, really.
Right, and you're the new, as we understand, you're the new Donkey.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
The podcast
I'm hilarious.
Version. You are. You're very funny. Now, Chris, let's talk about Death Stranding. What do you think of Kojima's new game?
I was really looking forward to hating it, and I knew for a moment, from the second I heard the pitch for it, I was like, this is terrible. I'm gonna hate this. This is gonna be a disaster. And somehow, I really, really love it. I did not anticipate feeling that way, and I'm still kind of whiplashed by that. But it does something super cool that I just didn't anticipate. And I think it's just the gameplay of it. The story, I still feel is like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't really care that much. But man, this gameplay is so mundane and also somehow super engaging. I don't know what the hell is going on.
It's funny, man, because I feel a similar way in the sense that I anticipated being bored or unimpressed by this game. And now I've not, or I didn't, I should say, pay too close attention to the different developments of it and the trailers. I really stopped watching everything about, I would say, like 3 years ago, maybe. And I saw a little bit of gameplay and I know a little bit about what the game was and all of that. But I like to stay. I'm doing the same thing with The Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima, where I'm trying to stay away from games that I'm really looking forward to and anticipating. But I must admit that I was also not really paying attention to Death Stranding because I just thought it looked kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I don't know that I'm like in love with it, but it's one of those games that really sets itself in your head. And people have been talking about the Kojima bump. We talked about the Nintendo bump and the Naughty Dog bump and all that kind of stuff. Did this game get a Kojima bump? Yeah, it probably did. But the ironic thing about this game to me is that, well, because people are asking, Chris, would anyone care about this game if Kojima didn't make it? Would it have this crazy level of hype and sales success and critical success? And my answer is like, no, it wouldn't. But no one would have been able to make this game, not because they wouldn't have been unable to, but because Kojima is one of the very few game creators that can go demand $100 million to make his game and come up with a result just like this. So that's what I think the most interesting thing is about Death Stranding is that, yeah, Kojima is giving this game a bump, but it comes from his mind, and really he's one of the only people that would have really been able to realize this game as it is. Does that make any sense?
No, yeah, I agree completely. And I don't even know if there's necessarily a bump now, because like there's so many reviews that are like, this is garbage or this is not fun, this is bad. And it makes total sense. This is like a very specific kind of game that your average person might not be totally down for. I don't know if it got a bump as much as a Metal Gear game would have gotten a bump, because like I like Metal Gear just fine, but I don't really care about Kojima. I hated Metal Gear Solid 4 like with a burning passion. Like I couldn't stand it.
Yeah, I didn't like it much either.
It's one of my least favorite games, I think, probably of all time. And the fact that I can go into this game looking at Death Stranding, no hype, expecting to really, really not like it, and somehow come out genuinely, really, really appreciating it and genuinely enjoying most of my time, if not pretty much all of it, with it, I think that says something. I think that says there's something there. And I don't really know how to really talk about it because it is a walking sim. It's a walking simulator, but not in like a derogatory way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a mechanical walking simulator.
Yeah.
We actually have a letter about this from Michael Casper, who said, "Hey, CNC, for all the talk about Death Stranding being a walking simulator, it's got to be the best damn walking I've ever experienced in my life. The walking, is it better, Michael, than the walking in your real life? The walking is the moment-to-moment gameplay. Just like Destiny is a shooter, Death Stranding is a walker. I've never seen something so mundane be so engaging, where you're trying to carry as much as possible, balance, avoid the BTs, who are the enemies in the game, keep your cargo and containers at 100% strength, and traverse treacherous landscapes, all while you have this towering sofa-sized load strapped to your back. Really curious to hear your thoughts on the game and whether you fall into the pretentious Kojima or industry pioneer Kojima camp after experiencing the first few hours of the game." Well, I think we've already mentioned that last part, Michael. I think that it's a little bit of both, but I think they come together, and you can only get this game out of Kojima. Now, for me, Chris, here's my fundamental confusion about Death Stranding, and this was my confusion going way back, was Metal Gear Solid 5 came out 4 years ago, almost to the date, actually, we're recording this. It came out 4 years and 10 days ago from the time we're recording this. I remember it was actually longer than that. I thought it was November 1st. It was actually September 1st, as I recall. So a little more than 4 years ago. And assuming the exit with Konami, Kojima takes a little bit of time. He gets his team together. He figures things out. He ultimately gets with Sony. You have to shove the calendar to at least 2016, right? Yeah. And I was confused. I'm like, how the fuck did they make this game so quickly? And I realized when I was playing it exactly how they made the game so quickly. With very rare exception, there are no enemies in the game. The game's completely empty. Any of the AI you encounter is basically on a computer or on these little consoles. So in other words, there's not much to build apart from the expansive world, the menu-based systems, and the story. And when you think about it through that lens, I'm like, okay, 3.5 years, including about 75 people from Guerrilla that worked on the game because it's a Decima running game. I'm like, okay, that makes a little more sense. So that was one of the things that I walked away with when I was playing it. I was like, it's not that hard to believe that they made this in 3.5 years, actually, because there's not that much to it when you really think about it. It's not like this game. It's not really evolving. It's not really AI driven. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's not a lot of surface stuff. There's not like a bunch of levels and like a bunch of different, scenarios that you have to play through or anything. But man, this is a beautiful game. This is a crazy good looking game.
It does look great. It's
insane.
Look great.
He says like pretentious Kojima and industry pioneer. It's like it's weird because I feel like Kojima thinks he's brilliant in all the ways that he isn't, but he is brilliant. It's like weird. Like this gameplay system is super cool and super new and super interesting, and I love it. But I feel like he thinks his stories are so incredible. When I don't feel it. I don't feel it with the story. It's like really stilted dialogue, really over-explained. I guess that's just kind of him. It's like how Quentin Tarantino always has these like, really dialogue-heavy sequences where not really much happens. I don't know if you saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
No, I haven't. I haven't seen that yet.
That's a very much like nothing happens kind of movie. And it's a movie that really only he could make because he has the, the clout to demand, the ability to make such a thing. And I feel like it's the same thing here, but like I think the gameplay systems here and the social systems here and just the traversal mechanics and the sprawling nature and the loneliness of the map, it makes this weird kind of vaguely multiplayer Shadow of the Colossus kind of hiking game that's somehow really incredible. I don't really get it.
Yeah,
if I was an executive at Sony, I would not have greenlit this because I would have thought like, how could you even do this?
Well, that's kind of my point, is that I think that when people are talking about the industry pioneer, the Kojima or the pretentious Kojima, would anyone care about this game if not for Kojima? We've had a similar situation with Zelda Breath of the Wild, which kind of is parallel to this. It just is one of those things where I think it's just a perfect storm where this game just comes in this specific environment from this specific person. It's only possible that way. So we would have never had to answer this question because I don't think we would have been able to even have gotten it from anyone else. And I feel like, Chris, that, I mean, in my opinion, I feel like this game was greenlit really quickly. And I think that this game could have gone either way. And they made something, here's the thing, and this is what I tweeted about when I was playing it for really getting into it this past weekend, was there really isn't anything like this. Like when you play a game, you can find its facsimiles elsewhere in the world or what inspired it. But I've never played anything like this. I mean, I've been playing games for 30 years of my life, and I don't think I've ever played a game even remotely like this. And so finding something like that in the AAA space, where you usually find new experiences for better or for worse in the indie space, I think is actually probably the most extraordinary feat of Death Stranding, is that it's a AAA game that is not like anything else in the AAA space. And that's exceedingly fucking rare. So that's what I really love about it personally.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Now, as far as the story is concerned, I should point out, we're going to do a Sacred Symbols Plus episode all about this game, and we'll do one about the Outer Worlds later on too. So we'll touch on both of those games in deeper ways in terms of mechanics and story, and obviously solicit tons of your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas when we do that. But I will touch on just briefly the story. I disagree with you in the sense that I think the story, while incredibly heavy-handed, is quite timely. And maybe it's just where I am in my own life right now, but it's resonating with me in a weird way, where it's kind of like Journey back in 2012.
Yeah.
They're actually kind of similar games in a way, in some respect, where you're experiencing this really ethereal and strange experience with other people around you, though you don't really get to interact or know them, and draw different conclusions on your experience. And so from that angle, I've really enjoyed it as well, because I don't really care for the whole reconnecting America thing and all this, and his obsession with America and American politics is obviously well known and established throughout the Metal Gear franchise. But I like the underlying message of interconnectivity and 21st century sadness, and this idea that we don't give into each other anymore in a weird interpersonal way. Like, one of the cool things that he establishes in the story early on, and I don't think this is a spoiler because it's so early in the game, is if you read one of the pieces of intel you get, they talk about how society started to go towards where we are now in the real world, which is like an automation, and no one wanted to do anything. And then we actually tried to reverse it and go back, but we couldn't. And I think that that's so prescient. Yeah. And I like it. And I don't know. See, that's what's interesting about this game, is it being incubated for so long. It didn't seem as timely back when he was, I guess, forming this idea. It seems so timely now, though. And I know that the story is a little weird and a little, it's full of ephemera and weird shit. And I don't know how much of it matters. And there seems to be a bunch of MacGuffins in the game. But I like it. I think it's really cool.
I definitely don't hate it. I just think there's a really interesting world there that needs to kind of hop over these barriers of his like stilted dialogue to really shine. Like, I like the world and I like the intrigue of the characters, and like the themes of it are really cool. But I just feel like, man, if Guillermo del Toro could just like not explain everything to me, like he's a game manual, that'd be really sick.
Yeah, that's true. And I like how it's just his body, but they have like someone else doing the voice, because I guess they could. Because I guess Guillermo del Toro couldn't be asked to sit in a fucking
Mm-hmm.
VO booth for a day and read some lines. So that was interesting, I thought, as well.
Yeah, it is cool. But it is a game that I don't know if I could recommend it necessarily because it's just so strange, but I would recommend experiencing it definitely. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Like, it's such a niche thing, it feels like. I don't know how many people are really going to resonate with this. I've already seen like a drastic mix of opinions on it. People either really like it or really hate it. There's very few people who are iffy on it, and it does feel like a game that you can't really be iffy on. I would pay attention to it, though. Like, this is really cool. There's nothing like it. Definitely surprised me, and it's definitely on my list of, like, possible game of the years, depending on how the rest of the year shakes up. But, man, this is cool. And I'm excited to just play it, honestly. Like, I want to play it right now.
Yeah, me too. I think about it a lot, which is funny. Like, I don't know. It took a little bit for me to warm up to it. I know that everyone's saying that you really have to get through Chapter 3 for the game to really expand itself, and I'm towards the end of Chapter 3 now, so I think I'm getting to that point. But
yeah,
up to that point, I've really enjoyed it, and I can't say why. Like, I can't help but think of like the FedEx or UPS driver that listens to our show that goes home and plays games, and then they're gonna play Death Stranding.
Deliver packages.
Yeah, it's like a little meta, but I have to give it up to them. Like, this really is something unique, and whether that's good unique or bad unique is up to the player. But
yeah,
I don't know, man. For me, I really look at that specific uniqueness in the AAA space, and I become enamored with it because we have games that are so samey that we literally call them like Ubisoft type games or checkbox games and open world shooters, and these are all great. But I like this game, and hey, man, it's another one of these games where you really don't have to be violent, and I enjoy that too.
Yeah. I've been running away. I haven't fought a single thing. I've been avoiding combat like crazy, and it's actually super intense.
It's scary.
Like, I remember being chased by like these people who were trying to steal my cargo or whatever.
The mules.
Yeah, the mules, and I was like on this treacherous mountain, and I was like, oh my god, I've got to run so fast, but I'll lose my balance and fall if I'm not super careful. And it was like probably the most stressful situation I've ever played in any kind of open world game like this, where I get spotted by something and I'm just trying to, like, the map is an enemy, and that's so cool. That's sick, man. I love it, man.
That's really well put. I like too that there's just no option to put a HUD on the screen, like a map HUD or a radar.
Yeah.
So you're always kind of going blind, and that is in itself a unique kind of situation. I don't know how I feel about that, but
me too. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, I wish I kind of had a marker, but I learned to kind of get over the fact that I didn't. The only complaint I have is honestly the UI. Like, the UI is like a mess. I'm pretty sure I'm only figuring out how to use it successfully just by sheer accident. I feel like I've just been stumbling into the right ways to use it.
It seems like the menus give you a lot of information you don't need, and they are busy as hell. It's so funny. I don't understand what happened with Kojima. It happened around Peace Walker, I guess, when he just started becoming obsessed with like rankings and repeatable missions and stuff. Like, this wasn't at all what Metal Gear, and this isn't a Metal Gear game, but this isn't what all like even with Zoe and other games that Kojima worked on, it wasn't at all the way he operated. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he became really interested in repeatable missions, ranks, all those kinds of things. And I think that this, in some way, is like the inevitable conclusion of that.
Yeah.
What I like about Death Stranding 2 is that I haven't seen the ending, so maybe it's a crazy ending, and I've only met the villain of the game once so far, who's played by Troy Baker. And the villain is excellent. I really, really like the way the villain looks, and the kind of Egyptian flair that they give the character, I think, is like really weird and really very, very Kojima, which is cool. And I like also the naming conventions in this game, just like Metal Gear Solid 3 had the naming conventions.
Die Hard Man.
Yeah, Die Hard, and like Heartman and all these kinds of things. Pretty cool. Reminds me of like the Fury and the Pain or whatever those guys were back, I think, in Metal Gear Solid 3. So there's a lot to really enjoy here, but there's more for us to get into. Shamar Lomax wrote in, said, "Greetings, C-dubs. With Death Stranding now available to the masses, I want to know your thoughts on the varied reviews of the game. I feel some reviewers were very lazy in their assessment, as painting this game as just a walking simulator when the game has so much more depth, but yet praise games like Breath of the Wild, which is very similar to the overall structure of the game with traversal, inventory management, and simplified combat. Do you think the overall trend of saying this game is boring affected some of these reviews? I understand everyone is entitled to their own taste, but it seems like a few of these critics didn't progress far enough into the game past Chapter 3 to give a fair assessment. Keep up the great work. Well, as I always say, Chris, and I'll say to Shamar, if you want to see how far a critic got in a game, just go look at their trophies. There's no way to hide it. There's no way to hide. So if you, first of all, if someone reviewed the game only getting into the 3rd chapter of what is like a 10 chapter game or something like that, they should be totally embarrassed. So if you know who's doing that, then you should definitely not trust that person anymore. But and Chris had talked about this. I see how a person goes into this game and doesn't like it. I mean, I totally see that.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's going to be much gradient, as Chris said earlier, to whether you like it or not. I think it's going to be like very situational and unique to each person, because I can see someone playing this game and being like, this fucking sucks. And I can see someone playing the game and be like, this is the most enamored I've been with a video game in years. I can see both of those things. Jacob Kloosterhouse wrote into us. Said, hey, Colin, and incredibly nearsighted Chris. My question is mostly for Colin, but how do you feel about platinums like in Death Stranding that take 175 hours? This is a huge turnoff for me, and because of it, I will never consider trying to platinum it. What is the maximum amount of hours you will spend to platinum a game? Not 175 hours. When I saw that, Chris, for the first time...
So what is this? There's a trophy that takes 175 hours to get, or what's the...
Yeah, so the cumulative platinum trophy apparently is predicted to be 125 to 175, according to PowerPix. That's Power PYX, which is a website. I used to think PowerPix was actually like one person that was just an incredible workaholic, but that's not actually true. And they make these great trophy guides. Now, I've criticized their trophy guides in the past because I always think that they actually underestimate how long platinum trophies take. So when I saw the 170 hour prediction, I was like, oh no, because I've never hit, like, they predicted something like 4 to 8 hours or something for Medieval, and it took me like way longer than that. So I feel like it's really annoying, but what's confusing to me about Death Stranding's trophies, and I'm sure you've noticed this, Chris, is they give you trophies like crazy in this game. So the fact that you have to like slowly stack up your trophies and to get the platinum itself will take 175 hours while I'm 20 hours into the game and I have 30% of the trophies already, I just feel like that's a little unbalanced and not fun. But we'll see.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess it's more of a thing for trophy people. I don't really. I see a trophy and I'm like, oh, neat, okay. I don't think about it until the next thing comes up. In fact, I kind of find them distracting. I usually turn notifications off for trophies.
Oh, interesting.
Especially because they tend to just ruin gameplay recordings.
That's true. They do that.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. It definitely doesn't bother me. I could, so 175 hours though. That's a bit.
It's weird because Sony. This is technically a second party game, but Sony published games typically, they have a really varied look and feel to them. Like the Uncharted games are one thing. The Last of Us had the incredible multiplayer trophies that we won't have to worry about with The Last of Us Part 2, thankfully. But then you have games like God of War and Days Gone that just take time and effort to get them. And then you have a game like Death Stranding that is virtually impossible to get unless you want to like play Death Stranding full time. So I don't know. I feel like that's a design flaw. I don't know why you'd want someone to play your game that long. You know, I can't imagine making a game where I would want anyone to play it for 175 hours. It's a little absurd.
Yeah, maybe a game like this, but I mean, I'm certain that I've played Destiny 2 for longer than 175 hours.
Well, I suppose that's a little different. Those are persistent games, but
yeah.
This is I don't know. Like, I just don't know. I like Death Stranding a lot, and I can't see myself in 175 hours still liking it. But we'll see how that all goes. And finally, Chris. Well, actually, yeah, we have one more question about Death Stranding. We have one more question after that, actually. But Dwayne Hankins wrote into us and said, hello, gents. Curious if you saw Martin Scorsese's op-ed in the New York Times. I was particularly struck by this paragraph. Quote, in the past 20 years, as we all know, the movie business has changed on all fronts. But the most ominous change has happened stealthily and under cover of night. The gradual but steady elimination of risk. Many films today are perfect products manufactured for immediate consumption. Many of them are well made by teams of talented individuals. All the same, they lack something essential to cinema, the unifying vision of an individual artist. Because, of course, the individual artist is the riskiest factor of all, end quote. Do you see this happening in games? Has it already happened? I can't help but think of games like Death Stranding, which has a mixed bag of review scores, but the unifying vision of Kojima as its main selling point. Now, I feel like Martin Scorsese wrote this op-ed in light of his comments about Marvel movies that were kind of controversial. Did you see?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he said they weren't cinema or something.
Right. So I feel like this is him like kind of writing and maybe trying to make that a little better, but with whoever he upset about that, which were probably a lot of people in the industry. But it's interesting. Dwayne's point is interesting because you don't have many games. And as we've discussed in the past, this was an attempt with Activision and Electronic Arts in the 80s to kind of overcome this, but they weren't able to have a guy like Kojima at the front. Now, Kojima being Kojima is one of the reasons that Konami wanted to get rid of him, because he was bigger than them. And it's hard to get money and runway to make games like this when you are a Kojima. But I'll just reiterate what I've said. It's just a very unique situation. And I feel like Death Stranding is a nice realization of what an auteur, so to speak, can accomplish for video games. And so I like, a lot of people get mad, and I think it's funny. Like when you start Death Stranding up, Kojima's name appears like 7,000 times in the credits. Like if you, it's like this, it'll be like one person, then Hideo Kojima, and then this, and like Hideo Kojima will come up again. And I thought that was funny, and I definitely noticed that. But I feel like with a guy like Kojima doing a game like Death Stranding, everything kind of funnels through his heart, through his mind, through his soul. And so you can understand it, I guess, through that perspective. Like one of the really interesting things that I think is in Death Stranding that I'm really surprised, not that I've really been seeking out too much, but that I'm surprised I haven't seen anyone talk about, is that the game is categorically pro-life. The game has a massive pro-life message in it. It's not even hidden. And you can look at that as being like a Japanese, culturally conservative thing, or you can look at that as being a Kojima Productions thing. But no, I think that's Hideo Kojima. And so it's cool to, Scorsese here is an example. It's just cool to see movies through that lens. And I like that we're able, I wish that there were more like this, more people.
There really
like
aren't many people in games that are like this. I can think of maybe, and even then it's like a varying quality. It's like Hideo Kojima, David Cage, I guess you could qualify as one of those people who just sort of does the thing that he wants to do to varying degrees of success.
Right.
I know Ken Levine is somebody that I respect a lot, but I can't think of many. It's not nearly as much as there are in like music or film. It's interesting.
Yeah, definitely not. And even when they have a studio like Naughty Dog, with Neil Druckmann is really the creative powerhouse of that studio now, they never really make it about him. And Neil, I think, to his credit, tries to not make it about him too, which is something that David Cage doesn't do very well. Although I'll give it to PlayStation. I mean, they publish David Cage's games and they publish Kojima's games. And I think the biggest question we have now, especially in light of this word that Kojima kind of wants to make films and stuff, which has been coming out over the last week, are they going to lock this guy down for another game? Are they going to make this studio first party? Does Kojima Productions not even want to make another game? Or are they doing it just to get some capital? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered now in regard to this.
You know what's interesting? I really feel like a game like this, and we've been seeing it more and more as video games have become more and more like powerful and more popular and technology is advanced. I think we're seeing a new age of kind of not interactive cinema, not in the sense of like Until Dawn or the fact that we have like very narrative focused games, but we have video games seen as a medium where like actors are getting attached to them in ways that they're pretty proud of. So I don't even know if Kojima necessarily would need to make a movie at this point, because I feel like we're reaching a point where so many actors would totally be down to be in a Hideo Kojima game, or like even plenty of games moving forward. It's a really interesting time, and especially now because making a Marvel movie, how different is it from making a game at this point? Like you stand in a green room, you're covered in dots, half of it's CG anyway. I feel like the lines are really blurring here.
That's a great point. And I think also he's gotten such a star-studded cast to be in this game to begin with.
Yeah. Nicholas Winding Refn is in it. Like what? Like he's like a director. He's actually kind of like a Kojima, actually.
It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely, there's definitely much to learn about this entire development experience, about how quickly games can be made. And I feel like, I mean, I want to leave it here for now because I think we'll talk about this much more in depth, obviously in the spoiler cast later on. But I underestimated Kojima, and I'll be the first to admit it. I think that when because I can relate to this, when you leave a job or you move on and you take like the first thing that comes to you or whatever, or people start offering you things and you're eager to say yes to them, it felt like that's what happened with Kojima and PlayStation. And I think that might be true. But I think that they were able, with Decima and with the help of Guerrilla and obviously the sheer amount of talent at Kojima Productions and Sony First Party, they pulled this game together, and it's much more than I thought it was. And it's much more impressive than I thought it was. And I think that even if a person doesn't like the game itself, I would be hard pressed to imagine a real gamer, I don't want to use that term, but a hardcore gamer, I'd be hard to imagine a person not turning this game on and being like, yeah, this isn't for me, but this is kind of impressive in terms of what it tries to do. It's kind of how I feel about like Fortnite, where I'm like, yeah, this game's super fucking impressive. I don't want to play it, but you can't deny what it does right. And so I'll be interested in the long tail of this game, the sales of the game, especially this fall. A lot of interesting stuff to be to watch out for.
For sure.
Chris, before we bail out, though, I do want to read Graham Lee's question, which has nothing, in fact, to do with Death Stranding. He says, hey, lads, is Fallen Order on your radar at all? I am pumped for it and have pre-ordered it, which I don't usually do, but I had cash a month back and wasn't sure if I would on release. What do you think of it from the preview stuff so far, and will EA send you a copy? Well, I've asked EA for a copy, but haven't heard back yet. And to be honest with you, I don't care to get an early copy because I have no room to even play it, even if I got it. The only reason I actually started even crawling around is because our friend Bunty was asking me for an EA contact, so I reached out to my EA contact and got a bounce back, so I guess he quit. So then I had to kind of go in there and try to figure it out, but I'm looking forward to the game. I think it looks really cool. The problem is that there's just so much keeping me busy right now that like I really want to get through the Outer Worlds and Death Stranding before I even bother playing Fallen Order or Call of Duty.
Yeah, no, I'm in a similar position, but like I don't know what it is with EA, man. They really like to just do Respawn dirty. Like I've seen very little marketing for this. I've heard nothing about it other than like maybe like a handful of previews. It's really strange how willing they are to just not advertise for Respawn games. I don't get it.
I wonder, I mean, it makes you a little nervous, right? I wonder if the game's good.
No, I mean it's probably great, honestly. It makes me, if anything, it's like, it's probably another Titanfall 2 situation where we got a fucking brilliant game that they just don't give a shit about for some reason. I don't know. I'm just like weirdly kind of okay with it, but it's at the same time, it's like, it's got to suck for Respawn. Like it's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, by the time we're recording this, 4 days, I think it comes out. So actually, but by the time when this goes to public feeds, free feeds, it'll be Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order will be out. I'm looking forward to playing it, but to the point that was made by Graham here, you know, I don't have much excitement for it because what Chris said is true. I think I've seen a few ads for it on YouTube videos and stuff, and it's not like I've been going out of my way to look for it, but I feel like a lot of this has to do with like the diminishing returns that Star Wars is creating, which I think was predictable. I think a lot of it, there doesn't seem to be a lot of excitement about Episode 9. And I think people are Star Wars'd out. I watched this watched this YouTube channel. It's really funny, called World Class Bullshitters. And I listen to it in the background sometimes. And this guy goes to like toy stores sometimes and just looks at the Star Wars section and like makes fun of it because like they're really subtle signals that Star Wars just is losing incredible amounts of cachet, and it starts on the ground with people not buying the merchandise. And so maybe Fallen Order's suffering from a similar problem. I don't know. And maybe Disney is like, well, we don't want to confuse. See, this is why a Star Wars game shouldn't even be coming out right now, because maybe they're saying like, we don't want to confuse the messaging with our movie, which is much more important. So keep the advertising to a minimum. I don't know. It's all speculative.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, let's get into the news. There's not a great volume of news to get through this week, but some important pieces of news have come out that we must touch on. Number one, a significant shakeup has occurred at the top of PlayStation's leadership structure, and the moves made appear to be very wise indeed. For starters, PlayStation's worldwide studios, the umbrella under which its fully owned studios exist, from Naughty Dog and Bend to Media Molecule and Insomniac and others, has a new leader, Herman Holst, the co-founder of Sony-owned Guerrilla Games and its longtime creative director, who will now helm the larger ship and will be in charge of all 14 teams. Holst's Guerrilla Games was founded as Lost Boy Games in 2000 in the Netherlands and was sold to Sony in 2005 following the successful launch of PlayStation 2's Killzone. So he's been in the Sony family for a long time. In the wake of this shift, Worldwide Studios' longtime shepherd Shuhei Yoshida will be leading a new internal initiative to take care of Sony's relationships with indie developers and to discover great new, smaller teamed games for PlayStation platforms. Yoshida has been with Sony since the mid-'80s and was with the PlayStation brand from its advent in 1993. He was the executive producer of games like Gran Turismo, The Legend of Dragoon, and Ape Escape, and became one of the most important faces of PlayStation during the PS3 era and into the PS4 era, though he's been conspicuously shelved in recent years. I think anyone with two eyes can notice that Sony shut him down for some reason.
Yeah.
Now, this news is pretty interesting, Chris, because we know that last month, the old CEO and then chairman, Sean Layden of PlayStation, was left, and it seemed like it was because of some sort of power struggle with the new CEO, Ryan, who we don't really know if that's true or not, by the way. I mean, that's just speculation, but I believe it. Some executive palace intrigue, let's say, was going on there. With his removal, our friend Gio Corsi, who was the head of Second Party, recently left. So there's just a lot of tumult.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement going on.
Now, I think that I know Herman Holst, and I've met him on many occasions. He's a really nice guy. And I think that he is a great choice. And I think he's a great choice for multiple reasons. I think, number one, he's European, which I think continues to bring balance to this new American initiative that is overtaking PlayStation, where a lot of like American PR and marketing and all these guys have a lot of power. And Jim Ryan seems to be really absorbing that. And I think bringing a guy from the Netherlands who works at a Dutch studio, who's in the European game scene, which is incredibly important for PlayStation, I think it's an incredibly wise move to let him helmet as opposed to an American or a Japanese guy. I think it just brings geographic balance to the brand. And as far as Shuhei moving over to indie games, I think that's essential. I think even more than Herman Holst's move, I think getting Yoshida involved in indie dev and finding those new smaller games is essential, because as I've said on this show and as has been widely reported, Sony's really shitting the bed with indies, and indie developers don't feel like they're being well taken care of anymore. And a lot of indie devs blame Sony for their games not selling well on PS4 like they used to. And I wonder why. Maybe it's because there's 75 games a week coming out on PSN. And maybe Sony, like when Concrete Genie comes out, which Sony made, and they can't even be asked to give a shit about it. I mean, of course, they're not going to care about your game. So, Chris, what is your take of this whole shakeup?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I'm not really sure about Herman because I just don't really know much about him or really Guerrilla as far as the studio goes. But I do think Shuhei in this role is super, super smart, especially because he's just been down for the count for some reason for ages. I don't know why. Is there any real reason why?
Yeah, I think so as far as I understand, and I don't think this is unique to Sony or unique to PlayStation as a corporate entity, but like I said, there's just a lot of palace intrigue at the top. And I think Shuhei Yoshida was just becoming too powerful as not a brand, but as like a face. And he wasn't really like an endorsed face, right? Like he just ended up becoming this, I got to say, and I'm not trying to be a dickhead or like pat myself on the back, but we kind of had a lot to do with it at IGN and beyond of making Shuhei Yoshida into this like cult figure, because we like started including him and reaching out to him, and we had all these funny pictures of him and we started bringing him on the podcast and stuff. I think we definitely had something to do with that. And I don't think it was ever the intention for him to be like that.
Right.
And I think that they lost control of the message with someone like Yoshida at the top, who has such a good relationship with players. And like I said, I think his shelving has been totally conspicuous. I think anyone that pays attention to PlayStation knows full well that this guy was put on the shelf. And so I think that him reemerging with this new indie initiative is so wise, because Sony's missing this. And I think you need someone at the top to encourage the power brokers at Sony to be like, these games matter. And these small teams have given us, like, we've cultivated, and by we, I'm saying like in terms of Shuhei Yoshida saying we as Sony, we've cultivated some of the greatest and most acclaimed indie, in quote, games ever, including games like Journey, right? And we don't do that anymore, and we should. And so I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome.
He's definitely the best person to do it, I feel like, because he's at the top, but he doesn't feel like he's like at the top. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's no insult to Sean Layden, who is a fluent Japanese speaker who worked at Sony in Japan, who produced games of himself. I mean, Sean Layden has roots going all the way back to 90s Insomniac and Naughty Dog. I mean, he's been around for a long time, but I just don't feel like he had the same heartened relationship with the audience. I think Sean Layden came in and pushed Shuhei to the side to try to be Shuhei, and it hurt the brand because, you know, I don't want to categorize Sony as this Japanese company that does Japanese things, but they are a Japanese company. And so I think having a Japanese guy like Shuhei Yoshida that speaks fluent English, that was educated in the US, he went to UCLA and all these kinds of things, I think bridged that East-West divide in such a way that Sean Layden just didn't. And so I think that in a world of characters, whether you're talking about Iwata back in Nintendo, RIP, or you're talking about the heightened character kind of building that they're doing with the Xbox brand and putting people to the front, this matters. And so I think it's great. And I think that this is a good move across the board. Ethan Fitzgerald wrote into us on Patreon. He said, "Hey, coronary Colin," that's probably accurate, "and cantankerous Chris. My question is simple. What does Herman Holst becoming the head of PlayStation Worldwide Studios mean for Guerrilla? As a big fan of Killzone and Horizon, I can't help but be a little worried about this new role and the impact it may have on Guerrilla. Thanks for all you do and keep preaching the Five Guys gospel." Well, I don't think you have too much to worry about, Ethan. Guerrilla is Sony's biggest studio at almost 300 heads. So, which is fucking crazy.
That's actually insane. I didn't know that.
It's a huge team. And I mean, that's why we all know that they're working on more than one game. Although I assume that one of those, a group of those people also now tend to Decima as well. But for me, I feel like it doesn't really matter because they have Angie and all these other people at the top, their production pipeline that's really been at the top since the original Killzone, that's just moving in to take his place. So I don't think Herman Holst leaving is going to have a great effect on Guerrilla, and I really wouldn't worry too deeply about it. Remember that he didn't have a great deal to do with Horizon. So he's a Killzone guy. And so if you like the way Guerrilla is moving, then Herman Holst leaving might actually be a good thing for you because he's able to bring his expertise and his decades of experience in the industry and at Guerrilla and elsewhere and with Decima and all this other stuff. He's now able to be a global evangelist for all that kind of stuff. And I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I think so.
Joshua Gershman says, with Herman Holst's departure from Guerrilla, do you think this means Horizon 2 is close to done? No, I don't think Horizon 2 is close to done. And I don't think Herman leaving has anything to do with that one way or the other. Remember, Herman Holst is so far above his old role as like the sole creative director of a Killzone-centric Guerrilla that you can't really compare apples to oranges now. They're different. Yeah. It's different now. You know, when they started making Shadowfall and Horizon in tandem, that's when the team became bigger than just, you know, Herman Holst and his team. So I wouldn't worry about it. No, I don't think Horizon 2 is close to being done. Mark Zebro Jr. wrote in and said, "Hello, Colin and Chris. This week, we saw a big power change at Sony with Shuhei Yoshida stepping down as president of Worldwide Studios, with Guerrilla Games' Herman Holst to replace him. Though I'm excited to see Shu's new role within Sony, I can't help but think this may be more of a demotion for him. With Sean Layden's unexpected departure included, what the hell is happening behind the scenes at Sony? Love to know your thoughts. Thank you and have a nice day." We talked a little bit about this already, Mark, but I do want to reiterate, Chris, and I don't know if you have anything to add to this. I don't know that this is a demotion. I feel like in terms of what makes I know Shuhei Yoshida personally. Now, I said that earlier about Herman Holst, but I really do know Shuhei, like, personally, as a person. Not just the guy I had some dinners with or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know him. And even though we don't talk too much anymore, we actually talked recently, which was really nice. But even though I don't talk to him anymore, I just know him well enough to know that this probably makes him happier than a pig in shit. Because he loves traveling, he loves being on the plane, he loves going to different countries, he loves interfacing with devs, and unlike a lot of people, like we make fun of Sony's PR team because they don't play video games, and they don't. There's one person on Sony's PR team that I can name that plays video games. But that's not the case with the guys who come from the game-centric production side. This is a man with a wealth of knowledge to share. And I think sitting in a Tokyo high-rise for the rest of his career is probably not the best use of his skill. So
yeah. It's probably not. It's probably pretty depressing.
Yeah, I would assume so. You know, he has twin daughters and he's away from home all the time and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that that's going to make this more difficult, but it's just a waste of his talent. He's not just some nameless executive. Like I said, this is the guy that produced Ape Escape. This is the guy that produced The Legend of Dragoon. You know, like, this is no fool. And I'm really excited to see what his enthusiastic love of video games, which is what he really has. I'm excited to see what that injects into what will hopefully be a new resurgent PlayStation 5 centric indie initiative similar to what we had at the start at the advent of the PS4 era, which was so important to the PS4's success. And I think we've lost sight of that 6 years later. But, you remember the PlayStation loves indies? Does anyone remember that?
I remember.
Like, that wasn't that long ago,
It's amazing how quickly it just shifted. But
it did. It's gone now. It's totally gone. They don't care about their own fucking developers unless they're making a AAA game. So, Chris, let's move on to the next story. Number 2. Sony has created a new first-party studio. Well, kind of. According to Games Industry International, the new studio will be located in Malaysia and will open for business in 2020. However, it's not a true first-party studio like Sucker Punch or Polyphony or the many others in the family that make games from stem to stern. Instead, PlayStation's Malaysian studio is being crafted to offer support on internally developed PS5 games providing art and animation. Such a move allows Sony to tap the largely unseen Malaysian game dev scene, and according to PlayStation CEO and President Jim Ryan, government support from Malaysia, likely in the form of tax breaks or subsidies like seen in Canada and elsewhere, helped the corporation to make this decision. Malaysia is a country in Southeast Asia with a population of more than 30 million people and an emerging and steadying market. Streamline Studios, which works out of Malaysia and has worked on games like Street Fighter V, BioShock Infinite, and others in a support role, is currently the largest existing Malaysian game studio with over 200 employees. That's likely to change very, very soon. Adam O wrote into us.
It's pretty crazy.
Said, hey, Sith is Christ and Sith Lord Colin. I think you meant to say Chris. Everyone's calling you Christ, which is well, that's fine, actually.
Yeah, I'm all right with that.
Sony just opened a new studio in Malaysia, and with the news that 70 devs from Guerrilla helped with Death Stranding, I started to wonder how big all the dev teams in Sony are. I'm a huge fan of Xbox as much as Sony, and seeing their new studios basically double in size now and still growing, I was wondering just how big some teams are in Sony's first party. Thanks, and keep making Tuesdays great. We will, Adam. So team sizes in PlayStation's first party stable, they vary from the small end, so Media Molecule is about 50. And it goes all the way up to the big end. So we mentioned earlier that Guerrilla Games is about 250. Studio Japan, depending on how you count that, is a similar head count.
Yeah.
Studios like Sony Bend are in the middle, about 125, but they definitely went up. They used to be about 75. So the team sizes vary. And Adam, I must warn you, you don't want studios to double in size just to grow. You said you're excited to see Xbox do that, but that's meaningless.
Yeah, and Xbox has been doing kind of the opposite, where they have like teams like the State of Decay team, which is like significantly smaller than, I think it's Playdead, if I'm not mistaken. But like, I think they're in a similar situation too, where they've got some smaller teams, some bigger teams. But like, a bigger team doesn't necessarily mean a better team, and it's important to realize that. Definitely
not. By the way, the team is Undead Labs. Playdead is
Undead
the team
Labs.
that made.
That's right. Undead Limbo.
Right.
Playdead made Limbo.
Not a big error, but people will yell at you, so I wanted to correct
totally.
you.
Thank you.
Now, Chris, what do you make about this new Malaysian studio? I mean, to me, this seems to be very similar to what we've been talking about with China, or with Sony Japan's initiative in China, in communist China, to try to extract some of those games out of that closed-off country and bring them on PlayStation. They've really been the first to do that. And so to me, this seems like going to Malaysia, small country of 30 million, but with some untapped potential and talent. This just seems to me maybe a wise, though risky move for Sony to move in and say, like, we don't really know what's happening here. We might as well try to make something of this and see what we can do in this place where there's probably a ton of talent that's willing to work. And I have to put this in there, willing to work for extremely cheap compared to American and European devs. What do you make of it?
I mean, it's a move. I definitely wouldn't have thought about Malaysia at all, but that's why I'm not a PlayStation executive.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of like when, especially in the 80s, I mean, this was still true in the 90s, even today, but a lot of the 80s cartoons we loved so much, like G.I. Joe and Transformers, all of that was made in South Korea because at the time, it was incredibly cheap. And it's still cheap to get Korean animators.
There's plenty of animation is still done in Korea.
Right.
Still, to this
day.
So
I think that this is both a nuanced, let's find talent move, and maybe we can make a real studio here. But the other thing is, I mean, we can have them run support on PlayStation games for animation and art, which are really expensive in first world countries. We can do this out of a developing nation, a second world country or whatever, and pay less for it. So I think we have to throw that in for fairness' sake.
No, for sure.
It's not like Sony's going to Malaysia to help the Malaysian people.
Yeah.
Number 3. As it does each month, Sony has revealed the best-selling games on the PlayStation Store, this time for October. Not surprisingly, this month's best-selling game was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, followed by, and this I was surprised by this, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and then The Outer Worlds, FIFA 20, and Minecraft. Other notable games include Borderlands 3 at 10, God of War at 15, Spider-Man at 16, and this is a weird one, The Forest at 19. It must have been on sale because that game sucks. The best-selling PSVR game was yet again Beat Saber, followed by Superhot VR and Skyrim VR. Fortnite and Apex Legends remain PS4's most popular free-to-play games, and Fortnite and Destiny 2 dominate the top DLC and expansions chart. So nothing too groundbreaking there, although Breakpoint at number 2 stands in stark contrast to Ubisoft's seeming disappointment in it, to the point where they changed everything about their roadmap because of it, and yet the game was still the second best-selling game of October, which to me indicates what I've already said about Ubisoft and reinforces it, that I think that they care about the gamer more than a lot of these publishers do.
Yeah, no, definitely. It makes me super happy to see Destiny 2 on the top of DLC. That makes me really, really happy. It makes me shed a tear.
I think Shadowkeep was number 2. I think there was a Fortnite piece of DLC that was number 1. So,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so congratulations to all of those that were on the charts. I will note,
Medieval. And
people have noticed this, no Concrete Genie on this list. And obviously, that game didn't sell very well.
Yeah. Well, Medieval's not on it either, so.
That's true. Fairness. Medieval came out on the 29th or the 26th or something like that. No, that's not the 29th.
It was the 25th.
The 25th. So Concrete Genie came out in the beginning of the month. So the word out of Europe is that Medieval's actually selling really respectably, but we're going to see about that. We're going to see about that in November. Chris, this is an interesting one, number 4. Remember Deep Down?
No.
It was a PS4 game being developed by Capcom in Japan and was supposed to be a methodical dungeon crawler. It was amongst the first next-gen games revealed, and it was actually shown off in February of 2013 when Sony showed PlayStation 4 itself. It was playable at TGS that year. I actually played it. And Capcom had talked about it actively through 2015 when the project went quiet, although Capcom kept the trademark for the game alive. Now, thanks to an interview from Eurogamer with Capcom's Yoshinuro Ono, haven't heard from him in a while, we have a better idea of what happened to the halted and seemingly canceled project. He told Eurogamer in part, quote, "The original team is clearly no longer together at this point, but people might have noticed that we've kept the trademark registered, and it's not been completely given up on. Every year, we examine titles we're doing in the future, and we bring up projects to approve and move forward. There's not much I can say about it," end quote. As Deep Down seemed to be a project focused more on creating a proprietary engine for Capcom, which it was calling Panther Ray internally, it's perhaps not a huge surprise that the game stalled, but that Capcom is keeping it alive suggests we may just see it in the future. Kenneth Ohms wrote into us and said, "Hey, Colin and Platanos." Chris, he said the food. Is that like a plantain?
Yeah, it's like a platanos. It's basically banana.
It's plantain. It's plantain. It's just
it's basically,
okay. It seems Deep Down is not dead. The executive producer, Yoshinuro Ono, has said that they haven't completely given up on it. Do you think Capcom bit off more than they can chew? Or did the project's scope change to new features, perhaps PS5 and Monster Hunter World's success? Anyways, please stop murdering those babies. They help us navigate through the BTs. That's a good point.
Oh, yeah.
Kenneth, and we will keep that in mind moving forward with the strong pro-life sentiments of Death Stranding. Chris, you said at the top, you don't remember this game, Deep Down?
No. I remember the name, but I don't remember anything about it.
So I was at that February 2013 meeting when they showed PS4, and there were only a few third-party games shown, and that was one of them, and it was called Deep Down, and it was basically supposed to be this procedurally generated dungeon crawler. And Capcom was hyping it because there was this really unfortunately named engine that they were working on called Panther Ray, P-A-N-T-A-R-R-H-E-A. People can go look it up if they want. And this was supposed to be kind of the showcase for it, very similar to how Shadowfall was kind of the showcase for Decima.
Oh, okay. I remember this.
So at TGS that year, I actually went to Tokyo Game Show in 2013, and I played the game. And I remember playing it, and I was like, this is really not good. I don't know what this is. And then a lot of people wrote about it and had some stuff to say about it, and then the game kind of just disappeared, and it became vaporware for PS4. But what's so fascinating about its vaporware status, kind of similar actually to some of the Rockstar stuff that was supposed to be on PS3, like The Agent, was that they kind of announced and revealed this before, or like BioShock on Vita, where they kind of announced it before it was like really greenlit, and so it never happened. And I always love Deep Down updates because, God almighty, I don't know it's been 6 years since we really even saw it. And
yeah. I remember it now that I'm looking at pictures of it. I totally forgot that this was called Deep Down.
Yeah, not a great name. Not a great name for the game. Not a great name for the engine. Yoshinori Ono, great name. That's a good name. But yeah, you can expect that Deep Down is mostly dead. But if you're interested, by the way, that interview with Yoshinori Ono on Eurogamer actually mostly surrounds Street Fighter. So if you guys want to go check that out, you can. But there's nothing really interesting for this audience. But number 5, speaking of Capcom, the company recently released a fresh set of numbers for many of its million-plus selling games, sold across platforms and retail and digital through September 30th of this year. The numbers were relayed by website Gamatsu. I just want to come out real at the top before I talk about some of these numbers. These numbers go all the way back to the 80s. It's really awesome. So you can see like very specific numbers for NES games and SNES games. It's cool.
That's crazy.
And I love that they released those publicly. So Monster Hunter World, which came out in January of 2018, remains Capcom's best-selling game of all time at 14.1 million units. Resident Evil 5 is in second place at 7.5 million units sold, which is unfortunate. And Resident Evil 6 at 3 with 7.4 million units sold. So the second and third best-selling Capcom games of all time are bad Resident Evil games. Resident Evil 7 at 4th with 6.8 million sold. And then SNES's Street Fighter 2, which comes in 5th at 6.3 million units sold. Other notable games include Resident Evil 2 Remake, which has recently sold 4.7 million copies, only 200,000 copies behind the PS1 original.
That's crazy. That's so cool.
Isn't that cool? And Mega Man 11, which came out in October of last year and has surpassed 1 million units sold. So congratulations to them. Capcom has released 93 games that have sold 1 million copies or more.
That's so cool. That's wild.
So people can go. The list is really cool. I mean, like Mega Man 3 is on there, Mega Man 2 is on there, like all sorts of Bionic Commandos on there. Really cool stuff. Old stuff. Number 6, a new patent from Sony has reignited the faint hope that we may get a third PlayStation handheld. Then again, patents don't mean anything if they're not used, so temper your expectations. According to Push Square, which cites a Dutch website called Let's Go Digital, the patent is for a new tiny cartridge, just like Vita's. But as the site wisely points out, a cartridge patent Sony filed last year ended up being for a Japanese-only children's toy called the Toyo. And this may be another similar patent, as it was submitted by the same Sony designer. Toyo, by the way, is spelled T-O-I-O for anyone that wants to go look it up. Still, the patent information itself is interesting, showing a schematic for a cartridge or card that appears to be larger than Vita's and shaped more like Nintendo DS carts. What it is, or if it'll end up being used in PlayStation hardware or elsewhere in Sony's constellation, remains to be seen. So nothing to get too excited about there.
Yeah.
Number 7. Last week, we discussed the imminent shutdown of SingStar's long-running online store and other online functionality, which will begin rolling out at the end of January. However, word now comes that Drive Club servers are also going to be shut down shortly after SingStar's demise. According to PlayStation.com, the online servers for PS4's Drive Club, as well as Drive Club VR and Drive Club Bikes, will be shut off permanently as of March 31st of 2020. According to Sony, quote, all online features, including multiplayer modes, will cease on that date. You will still be able to play and enjoy these games in single-player offline modes, end quote. I like how they say you can still enjoy them. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
As you'll recall, Drive Club itself cannot be purchased anymore on PlayStation Store as of late August, which was setting up this inevitable shutdown. Drive Club was originally intended to be a PS4 launch game in late 2013, but was delayed a year as it was in disastrous shape when it was supposed to launch. When it came out in October of 2014, it was still broken for most players, although it improved over time and sold respectably. Still, Sony shut down the studio that created it, Evolution, in 2016, and much of that team went on to create Codemasters Evo, an internal Codemaster studio that created 2018's racer Onrush. As far as I understand, most of that studio has been disbanded because Onrush didn't sell very well. So Drive Club is dunzo, and if you want to get that, so first of all, you can't even buy it, so if you don't own it, too bad. But I think that you might be sealed off from the Platinum Trophy if you're unable to get online. So this is something that people are going to need to pay attention to, similar to The Last of Us being shut down on PS3, if you care about that sort of thing. But still, no more Drive Club.
Rest in peace.
By the way, Chris, doesn't it seem like they're making room for Gran Turismo with all these Drive Club moves? I think so.
Yeah. Well, it's we got one more year before a new system launches, so that's about right.
Yeah, I think Gran Turismo is going to come back in a major way. I think they have to do that because of the amazing success that Microsoft has found with Forza, really stealing the steam, indeed, from Gran Turismo, which was like Gran Turismo for 15 years or so was the undisputed champion of sim racers. And I don't think that's the case anymore.
No, definitely not.
Although I don't give a shit because I don't play racing games because I'm not a fucking nerd.
Yeah. I, for some reason, own several Forza games, even though I don't play them.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
And I think I bought one of them, too. So, like, that shows you how fucking smart I am.
You are a genius. There's no doubt about it. Chris, the final note, number 8, is a wrap-up. The PlayStation blog reports that adventure game Where the Water Tastes Like Wine is coming to PS4 on December 2nd, and that long-in-development cartoon game Wadham is coming to PS4 on December 17th. That game has been in development forever. Website Gamatsu reports that VR puzzle game Tale of a Fragmented Star, or of the Fragmented Star, will be coming to PSVR in the spring of 2020. That card-centric RPG Cardpocalypse is coming to PS4 on December 12th. That stealth shooter IGI Origins is coming to PS4 at some point in 2021. And that previously dated rhythm action game Avicii Invector has been delayed a mere 5 days and will now come out on PS4 on December 10th instead of December 5th. Website Push Square reports that coffee shop adventure game Coffee Talk will be coming to PS4 in 2020. That game looks super cool, by the way. You guys should go look that up. GameSpot reports that the Outer Worlds sales have surpassed Take-Two Interactive's expectations, Take-Two owning Private Division, which published the game. I actually didn't know that until I looked that up, by the way. I'm a little embarrassed by that. That Take-Two owns Private Division. I didn't know that. It makes a little more sense how they got Obsidian's attention. I was always way more impressed that this random publisher published their game, but I guess I should have looked further. And finally, developer IO Interactive has confirmed that the follow-up to its popular reignited Hitman series, presumably Hitman 3, is underway.
Yes.
Chris, let's talk about the new game releases, and as tradition dictates, you will read first.
Alrighty. Astroneer comes to PS4. Astroneer is a space sandbox adventure where players can work together to build custom bases above or below ground, create vehicles to explore a vast solar system, and use terrain to create anything they can imagine. A player's creativity and ingenuity are key to thriving on exciting planetary adventures.
Very well done. Very good. Very good.
It was a grammatically correct write-up, so.
It was. You know? Even though on our Google Doc it's telling me that part of it is wrong.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
It's not, so I don't know what that's all about.
Google is incorrect, and they should be fined.
Sons of bitches. Bee Simulator.
Yes.
Comes to PS4. See the world through the eyes of the bee. Explore a world inspired by Central Park where you can take part in bee races, collect pollen from rare flowers, and defy dangerous wasps. Play with friends or family in 3 game modes, including co-op and PvP on split screen. It sounds a little bit like that PS2 game, Mr. Mosquito.
Yeah. Was that PS2?
It was. It was a PS2 game.
Huh.
Indeed.
I believe there was... Oh, wow. I could have sworn it was like N64 for some reason, but I guess
No. Definitely not.
Yeah.
It looks like an N64
game. Trying to speed by my blunder. Contagion VR Outbreak comes to PSVR. Dive deep into the events of the initial zombie outbreak. Mm-hmm. Explore the world through different perspectives and experience the beginning of the end in our single-player campaign. With limited resources, make your way out in free roam. Free roam in a single... All right. Familiarize yourself with each weapon in the firing range to best... I don't know if
best your scores if you can.
Best your scores if you can.
Yeah.
I guess it's a VR game. So
yeah, it's a little too specific, I want to say.
Yeah.
I don't need to... You have a firing range? So does like Metro 2033. What the fuck do I care? You know, they have a firing range. Every game has a firing range.
You can't play Metro in VR, though.
That's true. But you can play another zombie game. Yet another zombie game. Doctor Who, The Edge of Time comes to PS4. I feel like this game's already out. A new mysterious enemy threatens to tear apart the universe, and only you can stop them. Doctor Who, The Edge of Time lets players embark on an adventure through space and time, travel across the universe, visit alien locations, pilot the TARDIS, and solve the mystery of the controlling force behind the reality virus. I feel like... Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that game was on PS3, but I mean, I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that sounds super familiar for some reason. Fractured Minds comes to PS4. Fractured Minds is an immersive... I almost said autistic. Immersive artistic short game exploring anxiety and mental health issues. I embark on a journey through the human psyche to experience the everyday challenges associated with these conditions. Winner of the BAFTA Young Game Designers Award.
It's interesting. Here's my thing about these games, though, Chris, because I talk about my anxiety and my mental health a lot, and I like to do that. But when you make a piece of art, I feel like you shouldn't be telling me that it's like, in other words, let me play the game and explore it and figure out what it is myself, because I don't know. Like I like, for instance, Journey, we brought that up earlier, is a really emotional and sad game, but they never told you to be sad.
Right.
You know, when you played it, you just were. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little hard on
I don't know.
On these young people.
Hey, they won an award, so
they did. They won a BAFTA award, which is quite prestigious. Golem comes to PSVR. I almost said Golem wrote in. But actually, we're still reading the news. Enter a mysterious storybook world and take the role of Twine, an adventurous kid who has been seriously injured in an accident. Even though you are unable to leave your bed during your recovery, you never stop dreaming of exploring the outside world. That is, until you discover that you have the ability to create and control stone creatures called golems, seeing through their eyes and controlling their actions. That's actually I don't care about the golem part of it, but that's actually a neat idea to be in a kid who's bedridden's mind.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited for this. This is, I believe, this is Highwire Games. This is the studio that, Marty O'Donnell, who did the, obviously the renowned soundtrack for the Halo games, he went to after they fired him from Bungie.
Cool.
So this is, at the very least, I'm expecting pretty great music out of this one.
Very cool.
Kittened comes to PSVR. Take care of cute kittens. Lots and lots of cute kittens. Get points for keeping them happy and lose points for everything they destroy. That's awesome. Use points to upgrade your tools. Get an automatic food dispenser or clean up poop faster with the Poop Scoop 3000. What awaits inside the next box?
Interesting. I love cats.
Wonder if I could throw a kitten in there. It's a VR game, right?
Trap the cat in. Oh, I thought you meant throw a cat in the real world into the VR game, but you mean throw a cat in the VR world in the VR world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that. Fuck them. They always land on their feet. They're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Last Labyrinth comes to PS4. Escape a merciless mansion alongside a girl words cannot reach in an Escape the Room adventure game that can only be experienced in VR. Players must work to escape a mansion full of hidden dangers with a mysterious girl that appears before them.
Okay. Mad Games Tycoon comes to PS4. In Mad Games Tycoon, build your own gaming empire. God, I hate it. Build your own gaming empire. Start your own game studio in the early 80s. The journey begins in a small garage with little money and limited resources. Create new game concepts. Set up your team and develop the next million hit. Research new technologies, train employees, and build and buy new and larger office spaces. I like that everything in the 80s starts in a garage.
You have to start in a garage, whether you're Apple or Intel or what. You got to start in a garage.
Yeah, it doesn't count if you start anywhere else.
No, definitely not. Mercenaries Wings, the Fail Phoenix. What the fuck? Oh, the False Phoenix. I miswrote that. I'm like, the Fail Phoenix. The fuck? Mercenaries Wings. Why does it have to be called Mercenaries Wings? It reminds me of Demon's Souls. I hate that. Ugh, I hate it. Mercenaries Wings, the False Phoenix is a tactical RPG. Ooh, now I like it. In which players take control of mercenaries for hire. Hired by a king on a mission to reclaim his kingdom, the group of mercenaries are set to fight the rebel army as commanded, risking life in exchange for a precious coin. Well, now you have my attention.
Yeah, look at that. You got something. Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition comes to PS4. Slink through the shadows as a deadly half-elven rogue. Weird, fearsome magics as a powerful gnomish sorcerer. Vanquish your foes as an armor-clad dwarven paladin. Whatever hero you create, incredible adventures await. This is an old one, right?
Yeah.
Neverwinter Nights. That's one that I remember from a while ago.
I'll look this up when you read next, but I think Neverwinter has never been on console before.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct.
Romancing Saga 3 comes to PS4 and Vita, and you'll remember that Romancing Saga 3 won Vita Game of the Show at E3 because it was the only Vita game there. The celebrated RPG classic comes west for the first time. Developed by industry veterans, Romancing Saga 3 was originally released in Japan in 1995. This HD remaster of the legendary RPG masterpiece introduces optimized graphics, a new dungeon to explore, new scenarios, and a new Game Plus function. This is exciting for people that are fans of the Mana series because previously there were only fan translations of that. I don't even know if that's really a thing anymore, but when I was a kid or when I was younger, people used to translate these unreleased games in ROMs online. Yeah. And so for those that were not able to do that, or for those that want to play the proper way, which is kind of like me, it's an exciting moment. So I'll be buying that full price just to show my support to Square Enix for their continued Vita support. And I hope a lot of you out there decide to do the same.
Look at you. Sparklight comes to PS4. Sparklight is an action-adventure set in a whimsical... in the whimsical and ever-changing land of Geodia? Geodia,
I would say, yeah. Georgia.
I want to die.
Georgia.
Battle foes in top-down action using an arsenal of gadgets, guns, and gear. Explore dangerous corners of the procedurally generated world. Take down titans of the mining industry. What? And harness the power of Sparklight.
Okay, well...
It's interesting.
It's interesting. I'm watching season 2 right now of Jack Ryan, and which I really like, by the way. And that's about taking down a powerful mining operation. Huh. Maybe it's the same thing. By the way, I looked up Neverwinter Nights. Came to PC in 2002, in the summer of 2002. It has never been on console. And in fact... I don't think you ever even saw a re-release. So
That's pretty crazy.
it's just one of those series of games. Neverwinter Nights is a BioWare game. I don't know who owns the IP. I'd have to look deeper, and I won't do it like live. This is what I usually do when I fucking waste all my time on the internet. That's why I have this ridiculous knowledge of PlayStation games, I guess. But yeah, Neverwinter is part of this, I think, this movement of bringing a lot of these late 90s, early 2000s dungeon RPGs and CRPGs to console for the first time. Because we've seen this with like Icewind Dale is coming and Baldur's Gate and shit. So it's kind of cool because I have never played any of this stuff. So not that I'm going to necessarily sit there and play these now when there's so much else to play, but knowing that I can now is kind of exciting. I got to be honest with you. Tickles me a little bit.
It bodes well for the library, if anything.
Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order comes to PS4. And I just want to say that I hate where the colon's placed, you know, in this, because it's Star Wars Jedi : Fallen Order. I just wish it was called Jedi : Fallen Order. We all know what the Jedi is. I don't think we need Star Wars in there, but anyway. A galaxy-spanning adventure awaits in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, a third-person action-adventure title from Respawn Entertainment. An abandoned Padawan must complete his training, develop new powerful Force abilities, and master the art of the lightsaber, all while staying one step ahead of the Empire. I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. VR Ping-Pong Pro comes to PSVR. Rackets at the ready. VR Ping-Pong Pro is the follow-up to the hit table tennis simulator of 2016, VR Ping Pong. Test your skills with a variety of challenging game modes as you rise up the ranks to become the true Ping-Pong Pro. Do you have what it takes? Pick up your virtual racket and find out.
Dude, ping pong is so hard.
It is.
Like when you find someone that really knows how to play, it's like, holy shit. You have to be really nice to the other person when you're playing because you could just like slam the ball, you know, and just beat them really quickly.
I'm deeply off-put by anybody who is incredible at playing anything. Like my friend Zach is like a savant with Tetris to the point where he could play it like super fast without looking at the screen, and it honestly scares me.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling.
Yeah, it's scary.
It's what some might call eldritch.
Yeah.
And by the way, VR Ping Pong Pro, VR Ping Pong Pro, VR Ping Pong. I can say it multiple times in a row. I just wanted to try. Woven comes to PS4. Explore a woolen world where stuffed animals once lived in peace. Search for hidden secrets and customize your character with different animal shapes to solve puzzles. An epic adventure with two very unlikely heroes and a story narrated in rhyme. You know what that reminds me of, although it shouldn't, is one of my favorite... One of the games that I want to say favorite, it's ridiculous. An underrated game from the last generation that I actually fucking really loved, even though it didn't run very well, I really loved the idea, was Naughty Bear.
Oh, yeah.
I think 505 owns that, if I recall. They have to do something with that. That was so funny, that idea.
It was a good premise. That was back when we saw a lot of comedy games. We saw more comedy games back then.
Right, especially in the A space, like the mid-tier space.
Yeah,
where I think that really works. Kind of like that Leisure Suit Larry. I should note my brother worked on the most recent Leisure Suit Larry, so just throwing that out there. But it's kind of like that mid-space Leisure Suit Larry thing where you can get a little humor and be a little crude. But for people that don't know, Naughty Bear was a game about an outcast teddy bear who lived on this island with other teddy bears who didn't like him, and they would always party without him. They would have like birthday parties and New Year's parties and all this stuff, and they would never invite him. So Naughty Bear would go around and kill them all during their parties, like secretly. And it was so fucking good. It was so funny.
Yeah, it's such a good premise for a game. I love it.
It's awesome. Yeah, he was like no one liked him, so he just became like this really out of his mind teddy bear that would murder everyone. And you would, instead of blood, like stuffing would come out of them and stuff. It was cool.
That was only console, right?
I believe. Well, I don't know the answer to that, but that's where I played. Yeah, I played on PS3, and it didn't run on PS3 very well.
I definitely feel like it's one of those games that's like stranded on console, because like if that game was on PC, I probably would have owned it already, and it would probably run way better, which is a shame. Yaga comes to PS4. Smash, clobber, and bash the murderous legends of Slavic mythology in this darkly funny action role-playing game that changes every time you play. Play as Ivan, a one-handed blacksmith with incredibly bad luck, who must take on the impossible tasks given to him by the Tsar, or whatever. By the Tsar? Is that how Tsar is spelled in that? I guess?
It can be Tsar or CZAR.
I'm used to C. I like this premise a lot. This sounds really cool.
Yeah, it does. It does. By the way, Chris, I looked up Naughty Bear. Came out in 2010. It's actually on iOS, but it's not on PS3 and 360. It came out, in 2010, and it was published by 505, so I was right about that. So they own the IP, and they still exist. 505 most recently published Control, as you guys might recall. But the developer of it, I forgot about this. The developer of it is Behavior Interactive. And they used to be known as Artificial Mind and Movement, for people that don't remember or might remember them. And they just worked on a lot of random games. But I'm looking at their run of games today, and you guys will be maybe not too pleased to learn. They are a support team now that works with other bigger publishers, including on games like Star Citizen, which is never going to come out.
Oh, wow.
And also Fallout Shelter.
Oh, cool.
So we have that to look forward to.
Well, look at that.
Chris, I think that's all of the games. Now, we do have a question to wrap up on, and I do want to do that before we get into the actual questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas. But I assume we want to point out, or is there anything we want to point out on this list? I don't know.
Yeah, I think Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is definitely one that comes to mind. I really like the write-up and the premise for Yaga. I can't speak to how good it is because I haven't seen it, but I dig that. Slavic stuff is like cool.
I think so too.
It's not really explored that much. I assume it's based on Baba Yaga. Or whatever the hell. And I am very curious about Golem for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. But those are the three that I think I'm most curious about.
Well, what I was going to ask you about Golem was, are you going to play it on PSVR or are you going to play it on Oculus?
You know what? I'll bust out the PSVR to play Golem.
What a good boy you are.
I'll do it. I think one of my roommates, one of my 200 roommates, has a PlayStation Eye that I can borrow that I'm for sure he's not using.
You're such a good boy. By the way, the PlayStation Eye thing reminds me at IGN when PS4 was coming out, they had the camera and they were talking about all of the, Sony was talking about all the peripherals you can go buy, and we kept calling the camera the PlayStation Eye. And they got really mad about it, and they kept telling us to correct it to PlayStation Camera, and we never did. Which I think is so funny.
It's like, sorry, the PlayStation Eye sounds cool.
Yeah, it's much better than the PlayStation Camera. It's like, shut the fuck up. Do you remember, by the way, the PlayStation Camera there was a massive shortage of it? I think we might have talked about that a few weeks ago. When PS4 launched, they didn't manufacture almost any cameras because they didn't think anyone would care. And cameras started selling like really quickly because of the ability to stream natively on the console. So for like the first 6 months, you couldn't find a PlayStation camera. People might remember that.
That's kind of amazing.
I want to give a shout out to Romancing Saga 3. As I said earlier, it's a Vita game. It's not one of these shitty Vita games. It's a AAA Vita game from a AAA publisher. So go show them some love, but make sure to watch a video first. You don't want to just buy it blindly. Jared Kellogg did write into us, though. Before we get into the actual reader mail, this isn't going to count towards that. He says, "Hey, Cockroach Colin and Condominium Chris. Long time, first time. On the last podcast, you two were talking about the Blizzard situation a little more, and Colin essentially talked about the importance of voting with your wallet when it comes to controversial companies like Blizzard and EA, aka not buying their games. This got me thinking about Jedi Fallen Order, seemingly the first richly developed single-player Star Wars experience since Force Unleashed 2. I'd go so far as to argue since KOTOR 2 or Republic Commando. I think you're going a little too far for that, but my question is, I would go back to Yoda stories, personally. My question is as follows. With EA holding the Star Wars license hostage for another 4 years at least, is it not our duty to buy this game, therefore showing EA that this is what we want as gamers? Granted, all of us seem to be riding on how it reviews, but given the recent 20 or so minutes of gameplay released by Game Informer and other outlets, generic protagonists aside, this game is looking like a wonderful concoction of some of gaming's best mechanics. I am personally waiting until the release to decide, but this is just something I have been grappling with for the past few weeks, as it may be a chance to reshape the way EA thinks about the content they produce." This is a very insightful comment, Jared Kellogg. Hopefully you are from the Kellogg family that gave us the wonderful corn flakes. And if you are, thank you for that. Now, Chris, what Jared's basically saying here is that there's a conundrum, because if you want to hold EA to task for the way that they've treated Star Wars, maybe the way that they've treated Respawn, maybe the way that they, whatever the case might be, the microtransactions, Apex Legends, whatever. But if we don't buy Fallen Order, then aren't they getting just another, maybe even contradictory message? In other words, what do?
You buy the games that you want to support. It's quite simple, I think. I think we're focusing too much on the company. It's like, oh, we got to show EA what's for. It's like because they did all this shitty garbage to all these different studios or whatever. I still personally, listen. I'm for real. I still have a grudge because they shut down Pandemic. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I still think about that every time an EA game comes out. I think about Pandemic because I loved that studio so dearly. But I mean, I think. Yeah, if you want to send a message that this is the kind of game that you want, I think you should buy it. if you want to send that message and if you want to play that game. I think you use your wallet on a title basis, not necessarily on a company basis, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, my thing with this, Chris, is I think that this is an almost impossible situation.
Right.
It reminds me a lot of like some economic movements around the world to try to punish a country or punish a group, like the divestment and embargo situation that goes on with Israel, for instance, where it's really hard to balance that. Like I remember people, you know what SodaStream is? The company SodaStream. They make those, like, that's an Israeli company, just as an example. And I remember reading a story where a guy was like part of the Palestinian divestment and embargo movement, or whatever it's called, BDS, sanction movement. And then about how they had to balance that because they liked some of the products that were coming out of Israel. And like, is it really possible to be all in on holding to account major companies, major corporations, major political parties? And I think that it is, but I think it comes at a sacrifice. And I think you have to ask yourself what kind of sacrifice you're willing to make. And EA has its tendrils like other publishers and so many developers and so many games and so many types of games that it's really hard to hold them as an entity to account. That's kind of the similar thing with Blizzard, where even if you held Blizzard to account, Activision owns Blizzard. Activision just made $600 million in one day on Call of Duty, in one day.
Right.
You know, so like, I don't know that you shutting down your Blizzard account is really making a dent. And I think that's the unfortunate reality, is that we don't have the power to make change the way we do, I think, sometimes, because we're all not on the same page, which it makes a lot of sense. So when you have a situation like this, I agree with Chris. I think you kind of you either have to be really consistent. Like, it goes back to Mass Effect 3 with EA, right? Where that's when everyone really started bitching about EA. Well, they really started bitching about EA probably 5 years before that with the EA spouse letter. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
So people can go look this up, but this happened in 2005 or 2006. This was one of the first like viral pre-social media gaming industry things where a woman, presumably a woman, wrote about her husband working at EA, and it was called the EA Spouses blog. And it was basically calling EA out for crunch and ruining these guys' lives and stuff like that. And it's really a famous thing back in the day. You guys could really go look it up and check it out. It's interesting. But after that, that's when everyone started bitching about EA. And then it really kind of came to a head again with Mass Effect 3, and then it came to a head again with Andromeda. But I just don't know that we're capable of hurting them, because even if you wanted to, and I don't really want to hurt EA, I don't care. But even if you were capable of hurting them, you have to account for the 20 million people that play FIFA, right? Or did you see all the rumors about how they might release a Mass Effect trilogy next year on PS4? Like, that's going to sell millions of copies, regardless of what they've done. And so I think it's tough. It's tough to be principled. It's tough. That's why you should just not have any principles.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Chris, as tradition dictates, we'll read 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience, beginning with Zach Wishnuff. And remember, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/ColinsLastStand, to get your inquiries read on the air. We've already read so many of them, and we'll do 6 more. He says, C-Sticks, if Disney ends their Star Wars relationship with EA, what are the chances that Sony strikes a deal to land the IP exclusively on PlayStation? How much would this change the landscape for the next generation? This is an interesting question, Chris, for 2 reasons. Number one is that EA's relationship with Disney over the Star Wars IP is finite. And the second thing, I think it ends in 2022. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's when it ends. And now they can renew, of course, but I think that's when the initial agreement ends. And the second thing is that Disney also owns Marvel, who is in bed with PlayStation on an exclusive series. So I don't think that's likely. I think it's incredibly unlikely because Star Wars is so huge. But it wouldn't surprise me by any stretch of the imagination if a Star Wars game, like one Star Wars game, ended up exclusively on PS5. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah,
no, I would agree with you. I think that's pretty much my assessment of it too. I doubt you're going to see complete Star Wars exclusivity on a PlayStation platform, but I could see a one-off being there for sure.
Well, it's what they've done, as we said, with Marvel. They're able to kind of piecemeal that, right? Marvel gave a game to Switch. There's a Switch exclusive Marvel game and multiple Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. There's a PlayStation exclusive game with Spider-Man. There's a third-party AAA game with the Avengers. So they're able to kind of split things off like that. And so they could do the same thing this next go around. And I would absolutely love to see one of Sony's first parties unleashed on Star Wars. And the team that comes to mind for me is Sucker Punch for some reason. I don't know why.
No, I could see that totally. That makes total sense.
And maybe Guerrilla even could do something like that. But with Jedi Fallen Order, we're going to see if the proof's in the pudding. I think that if this game's bad, which I don't think it's going to be, or if it sells poorly, which I don't think it will, but assuming either of those things happen, I think that Disney would pull the plug on this relationship immediately. Because even though the Battlefront games have sold appreciably, the PR has not been good.
No.
For this. And I don't think Disney's in the want of money. Like, Disney got out of game publishing to stop having so many headaches in making and publishing games, and they just haven't avoided them because they were foolish enough to get in bed with EA, when I think that they probably could have found much better partners than EA. And I've always been confused why they didn't want to go through the trouble of publishing and developing their own games. That also made no sense to me.
Yeah.
I think they had a really hard time. I know people that worked on Star Wars 1313, and I know that was a really painful experience for everyone involved, especially because it's supposed to be so good. And Disney kind of ended up killing that just because it got squished between the Lucasfilm purchase at Disney and all that. But yeah, Zach, we'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a Spider-Man-like game, let's say like a TIE Fighter versus X-Wing game or something on PlayStation. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Maybe a PSVR game, actually.
That would be even better, actually. Because it's just we need a cool third-party proof of concept for like a $60 PSVR game that isn't Blood and Truth or something like that. You know, no offense to Blood and Truth.
Yeah.
Joe John Quinn wrote in and said, "Hey, Space Rangers, should first-party games be added to offerings of PlayStation Now at the time of their initial release? My take is they should not. I feel like gamers are actually starting to ask for too much value. Shortening profits to a dangerous margin is counterintuitive to the health and wellness of the industry. You guys talk all the time about how games are cheaper than ever. I thought you said gamers are cheaper than ever, which they also are." Joe. Pushing the price and even further down can't possibly be good for the devs and publishers. We want a healthy, vibrant, and profitable industry. Chris, it's funny Joe brought this up because in the Andrew Ryan interview that's on Games Industry International's website, which people should go check out, it's really quite a fascinating read, this and a bunch of other stuff does come up. And he says that Sony has no plan on bringing day and date first-party games to PlayStation Now, and that they're not going to be doing that. And that is in stark contrast to what Xbox has done with their first-party games. Now, the contrast can also be drawn that PlayStation first-party games are just leagues ahead at this point of Xboxes. And so Xbox is going towards a volume approach as opposed to a quality approach. And so they want those things on Xbox Game Pass. But do you feel like, let me back up. Is what Joe John Quinn's saying, does that resonate with you? Because he does make a good point that if we do care about the wellness of the industry at large, then even though as consumers we are trained to look for the best savings we can get, it does come at a cost. Right. And we don't want to bear the cost of that down the road.
Well, there's just no reason for them to do that. The reason that Xbox is doing it is because they're the underdog this generation and they've come out on the bottom. And this is a good way to this is a good consumer-focused way to get in the public's good graces. This is a consumer-friendly thing to do, but Sony doesn't need to do it. So I would be hard-pressed to convince them.
You know what I would like, Chris, although I don't know that this would be possible. Maybe this is bad business. I don't know. I'm not, I run a business. I don't know that I'm the greatest or smartest businessman. Maybe this will prove that. But wouldn't it be cool if they put a clock on it where they were like, PlayStation Now is full of first-party offerings that are older, as well as a ton of third-party offerings based on the desires of publishers and developers. At 180 days, 6 months from the release of every exclusive, it'll be on PlayStation Now. And at that time, we will drop the price. I like telegraphing that kind of stuff because it really puts people on the clock and puts the pressure on them to say like, hey, this game's going to be $39.99 in 6 months. They already said it. It's going to be on PlayStation Now in 6 months. They already said it. Can you wait? Can you wait? And I like that as kind of a bait, like baiting the line a little bit to get people on PlayStation Now, although PlayStation Now is doing appreciably as we talked about an episode or two ago. So I like that Sony's taking this tact, and I think you're absolutely correct that Xbox wouldn't be giving away Gears 5 for free, basically, if they could get away with not giving Gears 5 away for free. So, because I've been seeing a lot of these deals where people are getting like $1 of Game Pass for a month for $1, and that's incredible.
No, yeah, it's insane.
But Microsoft wouldn't do that if this was 2010. So you have to balance that. I appreciate what's being said here, and I appreciate the conversation happening around this, but PlayStation Now is not Sony's future. It is part of Sony's future. And if Microsoft wants Xbox Games Pass to be like the center of gravity of their future, then they can do that. They're well on their way. But I don't know if that's wise.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how that all goes. Kyle Listerman wrote in and said, "Hey, Kick-Ass Chris and Chill Colin. With the delay of The Last of Us 2, is there any chance the Ghost of Tsushima will be ready for the first quarter of next year? I think this will show more success for the game, with PS5 not hitting full swing at that point in the marketing department. I know it would be an announcement of the date close to the release, but it could be smart to wait till after the fall rush so it gets more attention. Thanks for the best." I don't think there's any way that that's going to happen, Kyle. The rumor is that The Last of Us 2's delay has materially affected Ghost of Tsushima's release date, but not pushing it forward, pushing it back. So I don't think they're going to be ready to go. I don't think it's going to be ready to go. I still think it's possible that this is going to be a cross-generation release.
Yeah, I think so too.
Now, I am so tired of fucking saying this, Chris, and I hate to beat the same drum and sound like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, although I am. Cross-gen releases are just not going to mean the same thing next time, so I don't know what that means, right? I don't know what that means, but I feel like it's going to be released so close to the next gen that they're going to have a hard time avoiding this. It reminds me a little bit of Beyond Two Souls, which was the second of 3 Quantic Dream games that were made for Sony, the first being Heavy Rain, the third being Detroit. People will remember that Beyond Two Souls came out like a few weeks before PS4 came out, and it was locked on PS3. And it gave Sony a little bit of a hard time because they didn't really know what to do with it. And they don't really have that same problem with the forwards and backwards compatibility of PS5. So again, we're going to see what this marketing looks like. But no, Kyle, do not look forward to playing Death Stranding or Ghost of Tsushima rather before The Last of Us Part 2. You will not. I mean, you could wait and play it after the fact.
Yeah, I guess so.
But they're not going to come out in that order.
That's cheating. But yeah.
Yeah, you can prove me wrong, I guess. Jordan DeBow wrote into us and said, "Hey, CM Squared. I was wondering why PlayStation doesn't have a flagship franchise. Mario will always have a game, and Princess Zelda has done everything but pull up her skirt." It's a little dirty, isn't it? "Microsoft will run Gears and Halo as far as possible, but PlayStation doesn't have a franchise that's synonymous with it like this. I was wondering what it would be if you guys could pick. I thought maybe Twisted Metal, but those games seem dead. Thoughts?" Yeah, Twisted Metal is long dead. There hasn't been a new Twisted Metal game in almost a decade, but it's actually been 8 years next year. But Chris, I do feel like they don't have that flagship. They've had them over time. They've had their Crash Bandicoot. They've had their Spyro.
Yeah. I think they have console. They have like generational flagships.
Yes.
Like I feel like so the PS1 had Crash and Spyro and maybe Snake towards as like viable kind of mascots. Although I would argue that Crash is obviously the one that people think of the most.
Definitely.
And then PlayStation 2 obviously had like Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper. PlayStation 3 was a little bit less heavy. I think it was, Infamous, Uncharted, and I think that's probably it. Maybe Sackboy.
Yeah, Sackboy was one of them.
Sackboy was that.
Yeah, definitely.
PS4 really is the only one that I think hasn't, although I think maybe recently has with Death Stranding's kind of iconographic visual.
Sure, and
cue.
Knack, of course.
And Knack, of course.
Yes.
You can't forget Knack. But I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily a good or bad thing that they don't have a flagship that's been with them from the beginning. I think it's totally fine that they have a generational approach to things. In fact, I think it's kind of helped them.
I think you're absolutely right. Exactly what I was going to say was that I think you could look at this as a gambit that, like, they're first of all with Spyro and with Crash. The ironic thing about those being PS1 era, late 90s PlayStation icons is that Sony never owned them. So that was like the whole weird situation there. And then with Jak and Daxter and Ratchet, like you said, with the platformers on PS2, but I think over time, their willingness to abandon or refresh things. So like they basically abandoned Uncharted, although you're going to see more Uncharted on PS5 from the San Diego team, I think. And they remade God of War basically into a new game. I like that they're willing to shake things up and that there's no convention that can't be broken, because I personally, I love Nintendo. Like I'll always have a soft spot for Nintendo, but I think it's fucking boring that you can always expect a Mario game and a Zelda game and there's nothing new. There's almost nothing new. If you think about like new meaningful IP from Nintendo in the last 20 years, you have Pikmin maybe, and then you have Splatoon, maybe. And that's basically it. So I don't know that that's necessarily super healthy either. So I like the idea. I mean, it's all about personal preference, but I like the idea that we're moving forward and that we know Naughty Dog is not making Uncharted again. That we know Sucker Punch isn't making Infamous or Sly Cooper again. That we know that even teams like Bend might not be doing a Days Gone sequel necessarily. We don't know. And I think that's fun. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes for a more interesting ecosystem, without a doubt.
Jeff Pollard wrote into us and said, "Hey, Colin and Chris, the trophy count display shows a number with a star next to it. Mine is currently 17 with 25% towards the next level. What is this number? How is it calculated? Does it even serve a purpose? Thanks." Well, no, it serves no purpose. I think we've already been over that. But Chris, let's get real nerdy here about this. I'm going to teach everyone how this works. A long time ago when trophies came out in 2008 and into 2009, people sat around and tried to figure out exactly how this was working. Because what is being described here by Jeff is when you go online and you're in a trophy, you see your little number in the star and it's like a role-playing game bar of experience. And you see that next to your name, and that's tied to trophies. Now, people have figured out what the values of trophies are and how this contributes to the points. So what people have figured out is that there's a point backend that's hidden, and that bronze trophies are worth 15 points, silver trophies are worth 30 points, gold trophies are worth 90 points, and platinum trophies are worth 180 points. So in other words, a silver is worth twice as much as a bronze, a gold is worth 3 times as much as a silver, a platinum's worth twice as much as a gold, and so on. And these points are calculated in the back end to give you experience. And that's what the number in the star is your level. So at the beginning, going from level 1 to level 2 only requires 200 points. So you're going to do that really quickly. And even the 600 points for level 3 and 1200 points for level 4. But I have my page open. I'm level 36. And at this point, and I'm looking, I think I need something like 170,000 points to get to the next level. And so that's why you stay on those levels for a really long period of time. So basically, it's just an RPG-like experience system that just gives you a little, like instead of showing the cumulative number like they do with achievements, which is fine, they made a back-end role-playing game system based on the value of trophies, which are hidden. But now you know the values of the trophies. 15, 30, 90, and 180. There you go. That's all you needed to know. Aren't you excited about that?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Chris, the final inquiry comes from Dylan. Says, "Hey, baby boys. As quite possibly your only listener using PlayStation Vue, I was pretty annoyed to find out in last week's episode that my service is going to end. I just double-checked my email and I still haven't received any notice. Aside from that, it's an interesting decision considering they bumped up prices just a couple of months ago to compensate for the cost they're citing. Best guess is they lost subs in response. I've long thought it was odd to brand it PlayStation and not more TV ubiquitous Sony, considering the service has absolutely nothing to do with video games. Do you think this is another example of Sony dropping the ball, or is the Sony name possibly just not strong enough to market the service into profitability? Love you, keep Tuesdays weird again, or whatever you do, or whatever you NY Cali nerds do. Thank you, Dylan, for your kind
Well, you're going to be a Virginia nerd soon.
Soon I will be in the words of the late 90s, early 2000s rap duo Clips, I'm going to be in Virginia, where ain't shit to do but cook. Okay?
Wow. I'm astounded that you even have that.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking of? Death Stranding's the opposite of what you're doing.
It is.
Death Stranding, you're going west.
Right, exactly. This is the reverse Death Stranding, we're calling it.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about this last week, but I did want to bring up again, because Dylan brought this point up that other people had brought up to me privately, which is that I kind of am wondering how Vue would have done if they did market as Sony instead of as PlayStation, because it does make it seem that, and you do, I guess, need a PlayStation device, but why not have it be a smart TV thing, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel you. Are you really surprised that Sony is dropping the ball and hasn't emailed you that your service is ending yet?
Dude, I can't believe that. I love that you found out from us before they told you, and you're a paying subscriber. It's amazing.
You'll get that email after Vue is shut off.
Probably, yeah.
So, yeah, I think is it Sony dropping the ball? I don't know. I like that Sony experimented in the space. I'm not so sure that being in cable and traditional cable is a wise financial decision. They've obviously deemed that not to be a wise financial decision. But from my perspective, I was just excited about the possibilities of having that as part of a larger offering that we're never going to see now. So that's the bummer for me, because I've been hoping for a PlayStation Plus, PlayStation Now, PlayStation Vue, all in one kind of package that we're obviously not going to get. So
yeah, that's. I guess I do think it would have done better under Sony, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. There's so many platforms that offer this that at this point, I feel like they were hoping that they could maybe market to people, to a gaming audience, because they knew that like the more traditional audiences have probably already been swept up by the overwhelming majority of the competition. I think that was their angle, was that, okay, hey, you know what, this is for people who, you know, are more into video games. Here's some TV for you. And I don't think it was as resonant a message or a pitch as they were hoping it was. And that's where we're at.
Definitely. I mean, definitely so. I mean, it's hard to compete with streaming. It's hard to compete with sports piracy, which is really rampant because because that's a lot of the reason only people would have cable. And then they figured out, I mean, there are really easy ways to watch any NFL game you want. For instance, I pay for the Sunday ticket package because I just like the quality and I like to rely on it. I feel like it's a little dishonest, but you can go on Reddit and find any of these streams in 1080 or 4K, you know, no problem. So I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, when you nickel and dime someone enough, I think that they cease having a problem or don't have as big of a problem with nickel and diming you back. And that might be what happened with PlayStation Vue. So RIP. But Dylan, let us know if you ever get that email. I doubt you will, but let us know. Chris, that's all I have for this episode 72 of Sacred Symbols. Do you have any closing comments?
I'm excited to play more Death Stranding, honestly.
Me too.
I'm pumped, and I'm feeling sick too, which sucks. I started noticing in the middle of the show, I was like, damn, I got like a thing in the back of my throat, and it hurts.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well, go take some, it's the worst. Go take some Dayquil or something like that.
Yeah, and I heard that messes up your liver.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that makes sense. It's alcohol, right? So I guess that makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Whoops.
Well, don't take Dayquil then. Do something else.
I'll figure it out.
Go take a homeopathic remedy of some sort.
I'll get the I'll smear the oil of a snake on my face.
There you go. Yeah, go get one of those you know, like one of those indigenous, I don't know what they're called. They like crunch like peppercorns in them or something, or like basil leaves, you know? Like a mortar, I think it's called. you get some of the dried out roaches in your apartment and all that, and you smear it under your nose like it's like you want to inhale it, you know?
Yeah, like it's Vicks.
Like it's Vicks Vapor Rub. That's exactly right. All right, Chris. Well, I'll see you next time for more Sacred Symbols. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.
Appreciate all of you out there supporting us and giving us love and kindness. You don't have to literally give us love. You know, don't literally give us love. But
yeah, please don't, actually.
I mean,
avoid the literal love.
Right. Well, literally doesn't mean it literally anymore anyway. So.
Yeah, totally.
But we appreciate your support, your kindness, your generosity. Remember to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/CollinsLastStand. That's how you get Sacred Symbols Plus, the ability to submit questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas, early ad-free access to our show, and more. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much again. Love you. Goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product of and a registered trademark of Collins Last Stand, LLC, and is recorded right here in sunny Santa Monica, California, USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Chris Raygun. You can find me on Twitter at NoTaxation and on Instagram at CLS Moriarty. Chris is on Twitter at Chris R. Gunn and on Instagram at Chris_Ray_Gun. Sacred Symbols is edited by Dustin Furman. Any snail mail can be sent to the CLS P.O. Box, P.O. Box 1233, Santa Monica, California, 90406. To message the show online, please use Patreon's DM service. As you know, all of Collins Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/CollinsLastStand. The following names are at the producer level or higher on Patreon, and we are eternally grateful for your kindness, generosity, and fandom. Chris Adams, Carlos Algarit, Morgan Ashley, Saul Balcazar, Taylor Barkley, Martin Beck, Tyler Bello, Mark Boggio, Barrett Boswell, Spencer Brand, Miguel Brewer, Lennon Brixey, Eric R. Brown, Jason Budnick, Josh Bushing, Austin Bullock, Dylan Burns, Chris Buston, Nick C., Alex Cabrera, Patrick Harper, William O'Carroll, Brian Chan, Sean Chandler, David Chestnut, Rodney Coleman, Simon Conception, Brad Cooley, John Cordero, Gio Corsi, Nick Cottrell, Philip Crone, Daniel Diamore, Colin Davenport, Night Draft, David Ellis, Jerome Ferreira, Joe Finelli, Eric Finkenbeiner, Rudon Fitzpatrick, Patrick, Chris Galvin, Connor Gashian, Alex Gates, Michael Gates, Salem Ghanem El Ghanem, Tyler Goodwin, Josh Gravlik, Miranda Grubba, Jonathan H., Eric Harden, Tyler Harris, Richard Hebert III, Kyle Hagel, Shane Hendrickson, Wyatt Henry, Robbie Hensley, Scott Hernandez, Asa Haas, Johnny Humphreys, Blake Israel, Azan Isa Al Ricey, Josh Yeager, Garrett Jagger, Joshua Jonathan, Paul Joyce, Greg Juliffs, Anton K., Patrick Kelly, Jeremy Key, Auntie Kinnanen, James Kinslow III, Ryan R. Kittredge, Mason Kodolak, Jackson Lastiqua, Joe Lawson, Don Q. Lee, Matthew Lenz, Patrick Leslie, Dustin Lewis, Keith Adrian Lewis, Chad Lewis, Lou and Ray Loper, Colin Love, Scott Lovelace, Josh M., Kiet Mai, Ryan T. Mandel, Ross Maranka, Matt Martin, Sean Mason, Jordan Moss, Zachariah McAdoo, John McCarthy, Josh McKinney, Joe McPartlin, Raul Melendez, Andrew Mendoza, Chris Moore, Betty Ann Moriarty, Ryan Murdoch, Adam Nix, Donnie Nolan, Dan Nolan, George Anthony Nunez, Jesse Owen, Jorge Palomino, Andrew Parker, Zach Parsley, Daniel Parsons, Marius S. Peterson, Gerald Pennington, Matthew Perdue, Enrique Perez, Jason Pettit, Travis Plymel, Jeff Pollard, Lawrence F. Prokop, Nathan R., Ryan Reeves, Michael Renner, Peter Reynolds, Shane Rayum, Jonathan Rice, Mark Richardson, Daniel Rivas, Petro Rose, A.G. Rowe, Jose Salinas, John Schultz, Michael Shanholtz, Toby Shootman, Joshua Smallwood, Ahmad Tamar, Ben Thompson, Carl Tolman, Alan Tremblay, Michael Vecchio, Oakley Waldron, Justin Wagaman, Connor Walton, Isaac Wastman, Damon Weathers, Mike Wayant, David Wright, Corey Wyatt, Tony Zuniga, Bloody Fang, Homeworld Hub, Gamer Filmaholic, Megadet, IQ Train, Throw 7, McDog 18, Infinite, Organic Produce, Madmock Media, Not Your Real Dad, Mubarak, Craft Heads Podcast, Richter 86, Hugo's Desk, Andrew, Ian, Chris, Dav9834, Rainick, and Casual Misfits Gaming.